Hey there, my awesome listeners. Welcome back to another heart-pounding werewolf shifter romance that's going to leave you breathless and begging for more. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into a story of fated mates, forbidden attraction, and the kind of supernatural connection that defies every rule in the book. Meet Aria Blackwood, a fierce pack enforcer who's spent her entire life believing she's broken, that the moon goddess forgot to bless her with a mate. She's standing in the middle of the Crimson Falls territory at midnight, her heart hammering against her ribs as the scent of blood and betrayal fills her nostrils. The peace treaty her pack desperately needs hangs by a thread, and she's the only one who can save it. But what happens when fate intervenes in the most impossible way? What happens when your destined mate is the one person you're sworn to destroy? Chapter 1. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy in midnight air as Aria Blackwood crouched behind the massive oak tree, her enhanced senses picking up every sound within a half-mile radius. Her heart thundered against her ribcage, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that always coursed through her veins before a mission. This wasn't just any mission, though. This was the one that would either secure peace between the Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls packs, or ignite a war that would destroy everything she'd ever known. Alpha Reeves is late, she whispered into her comm device, her breath creating small puffs of steam in the crisp October air. The forest around her was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, but underneath it all, she could hear something else, the subtle shift of leaves that meant she wasn't alone. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, hackles rising with an instinct she couldn't quite name. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "He'll be here," came the crackling response from her pack's beta, Marcus. The Crimson Falls Alpha always keeps his word. "Just be careful, Aria. We can't afford to lose you." Lose her. As if anyone would truly miss the pack's resident failure, the 26-year-old she-wolf who'd never found her mate, never experienced the soul-deep connection that made other wolves complete. Aria pushed the bitter thought away and focused on the task at hand. She was here as an enforcer, not to wallow in her own inadequacies. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Multiple sets, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as shifters. Her nostrils flared as she tried to identify the scents, but the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, carrying their essence away from her. Then it happened. The wind shifted, and the world tilted on its axis. A scent hit her like a physical blow, pine and leather, with undertones of something dark and dangerous that made her wolf whimper with recognition. Her skin erupted in goosebumps, every nerve ending suddenly alive and singing with an electricity she'd never felt before. The air seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. "Mate." The word echoed through her mind with such force that she nearly fell from her crouch. After 26 years of emptiness, of watching other pack members find their perfect matches while she remained alone, the mating bond hit her like a tsunami of sensation and emotion. But it was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. "Show yourself." A voice commanded from the clearing ahead, a voice that was pure velvet wrapped around steel, making every cell in her body vibrate with awareness. "I know you're there, Shadow Moon." Aria's throat went dry. She knew that voice from intercepted communications, from the intelligence reports her pack had gathered for months. It belonged to Kael Crimson, the most dangerous alpha in 3 states, the man whose pack had been locked in bitter conflict with hers for over a decade. The man who was, apparently, her mate. Her legs shook as she forced herself to stand, stepping out from behind the oak with her hands raised in the universal gesture of neutrality. The moment she emerged into the moonlit clearing, 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her, but only one pair mattered. Kael Crimson stood in the center of his patrol, and Aria felt her world shatter and rebuild itself in the span of a heartbeat. He was magnificent, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught the moonlight and eyes the color of storm clouds. But it wasn't his physical beauty that stole her breath. It was the way he went completely still when their gazes met, the way his nostrils flared as her scent reached him, the way his pupils dilated with the same shock and recognition that was tearing through her own body. "No," he breathed, the single word carrying enough anguish to make her chest ache. This can't be happening. Aria's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to run, wanted to pretend this moment had never happened, but the invisible thread connecting them pulled taut with every breath she took. Her wolf was howling with joy, finally complete for the first time in her life, while her human mind reeled with the implications. "Where's Alpha Reeves?" she managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. "We have a treaty to negotiate." Kael's jaw tightened, and she could see him fighting the same internal battle she was. The mate bond was already weaving between them, trying to override years of conditioning and hatred, but they were both too strong to give in easily. "Alpha Reeves is dead," Kael said, his words hitting her like physical blows. "Murdered 3 hours ago by rogues who want to see our packs destroy each other. Which means this treaty meeting was a trap." The world spun around Aria as the implications sank in. No treaty. No peace. And now she was standing in enemy territory, facing her mate, a man she was supposed to hate, whose pack had been responsible for the deaths of dozens of her friends and family members over the years. "You need to leave," Kael continued, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Now. Before my patrol realizes who you are." "Too late for that," one of his men said, stepping forward with his weapon drawn. "That's Aria Blackwood, the Shadow Moon Enforcer, who killed my brother." Aria's heart sank as she recognized the speaker, James Cortez, whose younger brother had died in a border skirmish 2 years ago. A skirmish she'd been involved in, a fight that had escalated beyond anyone's control. "Stand down, James," Kael ordered, but his pack mate's eyes were wild with grief and rage. "She needs to pay," James snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "An eye for an eye." Time slowed as Aria saw the gun swing toward her, saw James's fingers squeeze the trigger. But before the bullet could find its mark, Kael moved with inhuman speed, throwing himself between them. The gunshot echoed through the forest like thunder. Aria watched in horror as her mate, stumbled backward, crimson blooming across his white shirt. The metallic scent of his blood filled her nostrils, and something primal and furious awakened in her chest. "No!" The scream tore from her throat as she lunged forward, catching Kael as he fell. His weight was solid and warm in her arms, and the mate bond flared to life with such intensity that she gasped. "Why?" she whispered, staring down into his storm-gray eyes. "Why would you?" "Can't let you die," he said through gritted teeth, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Not when I just found you." The simple touch sent shockwaves through her entire body, the mate bond singing with rightness, even as chaos erupted around them. James was shouting, the other patrol members were yelling conflicting orders, and in the distance, she could hear the howls of more wolves approaching. "You have to go," Kael said urgently, his thumb tracing across her cheekbone. "This changes nothing. We're still enemies." But even as he said the words, his touch contradicted them. The mate bond was already working its magic, trying to heal the rift between their packs, making her want things she'd never allowed herself to dream of. "Kael." "Geo," he roared, his alpha command hitting her like a physical force. Aria's training kicked in, overriding the mate bond's pull. She pressed her hands against his wound, applying pressure to slow the bleeding, then forced herself to stand. Every instinct screamed at her to stay, to protect her injured mate, but the sound of approaching wolves was getting closer. "This isn't over," she said, backing toward the tree line. Kael's eyes never left hers. "No," he agreed, his voice carrying a promise that made her shiver. "It's not." She shifted mid-run, her bones cracking and reforming as her wolf took control. The last thing she saw before disappearing into the forest was Kael being helped to his feet by his packmates, his hand pressed against the wound he'd taken for her. As she ran through the darkness toward home, Aria's mind raced with the impossibility of her situation. She'd found her mate, the one person destined to complete her soul, and he was the enemy. The alpha of the pack that had killed her parents. The man she was supposed to hate. But the mate bond didn't care about politics or pack loyalty. It only cared about the connection that now thrummed between them, invisible and unbreakable. By the time she reached Shadow Moon territory, One thing was crystal clear. Her life had just become infinitely more complicated. Because no matter how impossible it seemed, no matter how many obstacles stood between them, Kael Crimson was her mate. And deep down, in the part of her that had always felt incomplete, she knew she'd rather die than live without him. Chapter 2. The Shadow Moon pack house buzzed with tension as Aria stumbled through the front doors, still reeling from her encounter in the forest. Her skin felt like it was on fire, every nerve ending hyper-aware and aching for a touch that could never come. The mate bond pulsed through her veins like molten silver, making it impossible to think about anything other than storm-gray eyes and the scent of pine and leather. Aria. Marcus rushed toward her, his weathered face creased with worry. As her pack's beta, he'd been like a father to her since her parents died, and she could see genuine fear in his dark eyes. What happened? We lost contact with you after. The treaty's dead, she interrupted, wrapping her arms around herself to stop the trembling that had nothing to do with the cold. Alpha Reeves was murdered. It was a trap. The assembled pack members erupted in angry murmurs, but Aria barely heard them. Her wolf was clawing at her insides, desperate to return to the forest, to find their mate and make sure he was safe. The rational part of her mind knew it was impossible. Kael Crimson was the enemy, the alpha whose pack had destroyed so many lives. But the mate bond didn't care about logic. Did you encounter any Crimson Falls wolves? Alpha Helena Blackwood asked, her silver hair gleaming in the lamplight as she descended the main staircase. At 55, Helena was still a formidable presence, her authority absolute within the pack. She was also Aria's aunt, the only family she had left. Aria's throat constricted. She'd never lied to her alpha, never hidden anything of importance from the woman who'd raised her. But how could she possibly explain what had happened? How could she tell her pack that she'd found her mate in their greatest enemy? There was a patrol, she said carefully, hating herself for the half-truth. I had to retreat when the situation became hostile. Helena's pale blue eyes narrowed with suspicion. She'd always been able to read Aria like an open book, and this time was no exception. You're not telling me everything, the alpha said, stepping closer. I can smell the emotional distress on you. What aren't you saying? The mate bond chose that moment to flare to life, sending a wave of longing so intense through Aria's body that she gasped audibly. Images flashed through her mind, Kael's hands on her face, his blood on her fingers, the way his eyes had darkened when he'd looked at her. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling like she couldn't breathe. I need some air, she managed, pushing past her aunt and heading for the back door. Aria, wait. But she was already outside, stumbling onto the deck that overlooked the training grounds. The cool night air did nothing to ease the fire burning under her skin. If anything, it made her more aware of every sensation, every phantom touch that her body craved. This is insane, she whispered to herself, gripping the wooden railing until her knuckles went white. He's the enemy. He's killed our people. I should hate him. But she didn't hate him. Even knowing what she knew about the Crimson Falls pack, about their brutal tactics and territorial aggression, she couldn't bring herself to hate the man who'd taken a bullet for her. The man whose touch had felt like coming home. Talking to yourself now. A familiar voice asked from behind her. That's never a good sign. Aria turned to find Liam approaching, his sandy hair tousled and his green eyes bright with concern. At 28, he was one of the pack's strongest warriors and had been trying to court her for the better part of 2 years. He was handsome, loyal, and everything a mate should be, except he wasn't her mate. I'm fine, Liam, she said, though they both knew it was a lie. You don't look fine. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. You look like you've seen a ghost. The moment his fingers made contact with her skin, Aria jerked away as if she'd been burned. After experiencing the electric connection with Kael, Liam's touch felt wrong, foreign and unwelcome. The reaction was so strong that Liam's eyes widened in surprise. Aria? What's wrong? Nothing, She couldn't finish the sentence. How could she explain that his touch, which had never bothered her before, now felt like a betrayal of something sacred? Did something happen tonight? Liam pressed, his warrior instincts clearly picking up on her distress. You've been acting strange ever since you got back. I told everyone what happened. The treaty meeting was compromised. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Liam moved closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone he used when they were alone. Aria, I've been waiting for the right moment to say this, but with everything that's happening with the Crimson Falls pack, life feels too short to waste. Aria's stomach plummeted as she realized what was coming. Liam, don't. I love you, he said simply, his eyes shining with sincerity. I know you don't feel the mate bond with me, but we could have something real. Something lasting. You don't have to be alone anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 hours ago, she might have considered his offer. She'd been so tired of being the pack's only unmated wolf, so weary of the pitying looks and whispered conversations about her condition. Liam was offering her everything she'd thought she wanted: acceptance, companionship, a place to belong. But now she knew what she'd been missing. Now she understood why nothing had ever felt right before. I can't, she whispered, her heart breaking for both of them. Liam, I'm sorry, but I can't. His face crumpled with disappointment and confusion.
Why?
Is it because of tonight? Because of whatever happened out there? Before she could answer, the mate bond pulsed again, stronger this time, and she could swear she felt Kael's pain echoing through the connection. Was he still hurt? Was the gunshot wound worse than she'd thought? I have to go, she said abruptly, pushing past Liam toward the door. Aria, wait. He grabbed her wrist, and this time she couldn't suppress the growl that rumbled in her chest. Liam released her immediately, shock written across his features. What the hell was that? I need to be alone, she said, not trusting herself to explain further. She fled into the pack house, ignoring the curious stares from the wolves still gathered in the main room. Her feet carried her up the stairs and down the familiar hallway to her bedroom, where she collapsed onto her bed and buried her face in her pillows. The scent of pine and leather seemed to cling to her clothes, her skin, her very soul. Even separated by miles of forest, she could feel Kael like a constant presence in the back of her mind. The mate bond was strengthening, trying to draw them together despite every rational reason they should stay apart. A soft knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Aria? It's Helena. We need to talk. Aria's wolf whimpered with anxiety. Her aunt's alpha senses would pick up on any lie, any attempt at deception. But she couldn't reveal the truth, not when it would mean choosing between her mate and her pack. Come in, she called reluctantly. Helena entered and closed the door behind her, her expression grave. I've been thinking about your reaction downstairs, she said, without preamble. The way you deflected my questions, the emotional distress I can still smell on you. There's only one thing that would cause that kind of response. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. Aunt Helena, you found your mate tonight, didn't you? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Aria opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Helena had raised her, loved her, protected her. She deserved the truth, even if it destroyed everything. Yes, Aria whispered, the admission feeling like a knife to her chest. Helena's face softened with relief and joy. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. After all these years of waiting, of wondering, who is he? Is he from Reeves' pack? Is that why the meeting went wrong? Aria closed her eyes, wishing she could disappear. It's complicated. Complicated how? The silence stretched between them until it became unbearable. When Aria finally opened her eyes, Helena's expression had shifted from joy to suspicion. Aria, her aunt said slowly. Who is your mate? You're going to hate me, Aria whispered. I could never hate you. You're my daughter in everything but blood.
Just tell me.
Aria took a shuddering breath, knowing that the next words out of her mouth would change everything between them forever. It's Kael Crimson. Helena went perfectly still, her face draining of all color. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of wolves moving through the pack house below. That's impossible, Helena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I know. He's the enemy. He's killed our people. His pack murdered your parents. I know. The moon goddess wouldn't be so cruel. Apparently she would. Helena sank into the chair beside Aria's desk, looking suddenly older than her 55 years. Tell me everything. Every detail of what happened tonight.
So Aria did.
She told her aunt about the scent that had nearly brought her to her knees, about the instant recognition that had passed between them, about the way Kael had thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for her. With each word, Helena's expression grew more pained, more conflicted. He saved your life, Helena said when the story was finished. Yes. Even knowing who you were. Yes.
And you feel the bond.
Truly. Aria nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. He's everything I didn't know I was missing. But he's also the alpha of the pack that destroyed our family, Helena finished grimly. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the impossible situation settling between them like a stone. What are you going to do? Helena asked eventually. I don't know, Aria admitted. The logical thing would be to reject the bond, to pretend this never happened and go on with my life. But I can feel him, she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest where the mate bond pulsed with steady warmth. Even now, miles away, I can feel his pain from that gunshot wound. I can sense his confusion, his conflict. The bond is already so strong, and it's only been a few hours. Helena reached over and took Aria's hand, her touch gentle despite the turmoil in her eyes. Sweetheart, I need you to understand something. If this gets out, if the pack learns that your mate is Kael Crimson, it will tear us apart. Some will see it as an opportunity for peace, but others will see it as the ultimate betrayal. I know. And if the Crimson Falls pack learns about it, they'll probably try to kill me, Aria finished. I know that too. So, what do we do? Aria looked at her aunt, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise her, who'd put aside her own grief to become both mother and alpha to a broken pack. Helena deserved a niece who could put duty before desire, who could make the hard choices for the good of everyone. But the mate bond pulsed again, and Aria knew with crystal clarity that she couldn't give up the one thing she'd waited her entire life to find. We keep it secret, she said finally. For now, at least. Until I can figure out what this means, what it could mean for both our packs. Helena squeezed her hand. And, if you can't find a way to make it work? Aria met her aunt's eyes, seeing her own pain reflected there. Then I'll do what's best for the pack. I'll reject the bond and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. But even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. She'd rather die than reject her mate, and something told her that Kael Crimson felt exactly the same way. The question was, how long could they fight fate before it destroyed them both? Outside her window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Aria couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 3. 3 days after the failed treaty meeting, Aria felt like she was slowly losing her mind. The mate bond had strengthened with each passing hour, creating a constant ache in her chest that no amount of training or distraction could ease. She'd thrown herself into pack duties with desperate intensity, leading patrols, updating security protocols, anything to keep her mind off the impossible man who haunted her every waking moment. It wasn't working. You're going to wear a hole in the floor, Marcus observed from his position at the kitchen table, where he was reviewing patrol schedules over his morning coffee. The beta's weathered face creased with concern as he watched Aria pace back and forth across the pack house kitchen like a caged animal. I'm fine, Aria snapped, then immediately felt guilty for taking her frustration out on him. Sorry, Marcus. I haven't been sleeping well. None of us have, he replied gently. The whole pack is on edge after what happened with Alpha Reeves. Everyone's waiting for Crimson Falls to make their move. At the mention of the rival pack, the mate bond flared to life in Aria's chest, sending a wave of longing so intense that she had to grip the counter to stay upright. Somewhere out there, Kael was probably dealing with his own counsel, his own impossible situation. Was he thinking about her? Was he fighting the same internal war that was tearing her apart? Aria? Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? She blinked, realizing she'd been staring out the window toward Crimson Falls territory with an expression that probably revealed far too much. "I'm fine. Just thinking about security measures." Before Marcus could respond, the kitchen door burst open and Helena strode in, her silver hair windswept and her pale eyes blazing with an emotion Aria couldn't identify. "We have a problem," the Alpha announced without preamble. "A big one." Aria's wolf immediately went on high alert. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves 3 dead rogues found on our southern border and a message carved into the nearest tree." Helena's jaw tightened. "It's addressed to you specifically." The blood drained from Aria's face. "What did it say?" "The she-wolf who killed my brother will pay. Tell her I'm coming." Signed with James Cortez's scent mark. Marcus cursed under his breath, but Aria barely heard him. James, the Crimson Falls wolf who'd shot at her in the forest, whose bullet had found Kael instead. The man whose younger brother had died in that border skirmish 2 years ago, a death that still haunted her nightmares. "He's gone rogue," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It would seem so." Helena moved closer, her alpha authority radiating from every pore. "The question is, what do we do about it? Technically, he's no longer Crimson Falls' responsibility, but they won't see it that way," Aria finished. "They'll assume we killed him if he disappears." "Exactly." Helena's expression was grim. "We're already on the brink of war. This could be the push that sends us over the edge." Aria's mind raced through the possibilities, each one more disastrous than the last. James was a skilled tracker and a deadly fighter, consumed by grief and rage that made him unpredictable. If he was targeting her specifically, he wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. "I'll handle it," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Absolutely not," Marcus interjected, rising from his chair with the authority of his beta position. "You're not facing a rogue wolf alone, especially one with a personal vendetta. He's after me specifically. If I don't show, he'll start picking off pack members to draw me out." Aria met her aunt's eyes, seeing her own resolve reflected there. "You know I'm right." Helena was quiet for a long moment, her alpha instincts warring with her protective feelings. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. "You take backup. At least 3 wolves." Helena. "Non-negotiable, Aria. I won't lose you to some grief-crazed rogue." Her aunt's voice softened slightly. "You're all the family I have left." The words hit Aria like a physical blow, reminding her of everything she stood to lose if her secret about Kael ever came to light. Helena had already lost her sister, Aria's mother, to pack violence. How could she possibly tell this woman that she was mated to the enemy? "Fine," Aria agreed. 3 wolves. But I choose who comes with me. Done. Helena turned to Marcus. "I want full perimeter security while she's gone. If this is part of some larger Crimson Falls strategy." "It's not," Aria said quickly, then caught herself. How could she possibly know that? She covered her mistake by adding, "James was always a loose cannon. His own pack probably couldn't control him after what happened." Helena's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't question the statement. "Be that as it may, I want us prepared for anything." 20 minutes later, Aria was suited up in tactical gear and heading into the forest with 3 of her most trusted packmates. She'd chosen warriors she knew could handle themselves: Sarah, a deadly sniper with ice in her veins; David, a tracker whose skills rivaled her own; and Tom, a massive man whose wolf form could take down an opponent twice his size. But as they moved deeper into the woods toward the southern border, Aria's thoughts weren't on strategy or combat techniques. They were on the mate bond that was pulling her steadily east, toward Crimson Falls territory, toward the man she couldn't stop thinking about. "Contact," David whispered, raising his hand to signal a halt. 2 miles ahead. Multiple heartbeats, but something's off about them. Aria's enhanced hearing picked up the sounds he detected: the rapid, erratic beating of hearts under extreme stress, the harsh gasping of labored breathing, the low whimpers of pain. Her wolf bristled with unease. "How many?" she asked. "Hard to tell. At least 4, maybe 5. But like I said, something's wrong." They moved forward with careful stealth, using the thick undergrowth for cover as they approached the source of the sounds. What they found made Aria's blood run cold. 5 wolves were strung up in a clearing, suspended from tree branches by silver chains that burned their skin where they touched. For were clearly Shadow Moon Pack members. She recognized them as border patrol guards who'd gone missing the night before. But the fifth was Kael Crimson. Aria's heart nearly stopped as she took in his condition. His dark hair was matted with blood, his clothes torn and stained. The silver chains had left angry red welts across his chest and arms, and she could see the barely healed gunshot wound from 3 nights ago had been reopened, fresh blood seeping through his shirt. But it was his eyes that undid her completely. When his gaze found hers across the clearing, the mate bond exploded to life with such intensity that she gasped audibly. Pain, relief, desperate longing. All of it crashed through their connection like a tidal wave. "Get out of here," his eyes seemed to say. "This is a trap." Well, a familiar voice called from the shadows. "The guest of honor has finally arrived." James Cortez stepped into view, his sandy hair disheveled and his eyes wild with the kind of madness that came from too much grief and not enough sleep. He was holding a silver-bladed knife, its surface gleaming in the dappled sunlight. "Hello, Aria," he continued, his voice conversational despite the insanity in his gaze. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." "Let them go, James," Aria said, stepping out of the tree line with her hands raised. Behind her, she could feel Sarah, David, and Tom moving into position. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong," James replied, twirling the knife between his fingers. "See, I've learned some very interesting things about you, Miss Blackwood. Things that would shock your precious pack if they knew." Aria's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" James smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression, only the cold calculation of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "Tell me, how long have you been sneaking around with the enemy?" The question hung in the air, like a loaded weapon. Aria was dimly aware of Sarah, David, and Tom shifting behind her, confusion and suspicion radiating from their positions. But all she could focus on was Kael's tortured expression, the way his whole body tensed as if preparing for the worst. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," she began. "No games," James interrupted. "Just truth. I saw you that night, you know.
Saw the way you looked at him.
Saw the way he threw himself in front of my bullet." His laugh was bitter and harsh. "Did you really think no one would notice?" Aria's world tilted on its axis. If James had seen their interaction, if he'd put together the pieces about the mate bond. "You're insane," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" James moved closer to Kael, pressing the silver blade against his throat. The alpha's jaw clenched as the metal burned his skin, but he didn't make a sound. "Tell them, Crimson. Tell them what you told me when I was questioning you." Kael's storm-gray eyes met hers across the clearing, and she could see the apology in them, the regret for whatever James had forced out of him under torture. "He didn't tell me anything," James continued when Kael remained silent. "But he didn't have to. I could smell it on him, your scent, mixed with his own. The scent of a mated pair." Behind Aria, she heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, David's muttered curse, Tom's low growl of betrayal. Her world was crashing down around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Is it true?" David asked, his voice tight with anger. "Are you mated to him?" Aria opened her mouth to deny it, to somehow salvage this impossible situation, but the words wouldn't come. The mate bond was singing between her and Kael, impossible to ignore or explain away. She could feel his pain as if it were her own, could sense his desperate need to protect her even while chained with silver. "Answer me," David roared, his wolf rising close to the surface. "Yes," Aria whispered, the admission feeling like a death sentence. "Yes, it's true." The silence that followed was deafening. She could feel her packmates' shock, their sense of betrayal, their confusion about what this meant for everything they'd believed about loyalty and duty. James's triumphant laughter shattered the moment. "There it is," he crowed.
"The truth at last."
The precious Shadow Moon Enforcer, mated to the enemy. What do you think your pack will do when they find out, Aria? What will they do when they learn you've been chosen by the man who killed your own parents? That's enough. Kael spoke for the first time, his voice rough with pain but still carrying the absolute authority of an alpha. Your quarrel is with me, not with her. Let the others go, and we'll settle this between us. Oh, I don't think so, James replied, pressing the knife deeper into Kael's throat until a thin line of blood appeared. See, this isn't just about revenge anymore. This is about starting the war that should have happened years ago. When I kill you both here, in front of witnesses from both packs, there'll be no stopping the bloodshed. Aria's mind raced, calculating distances and angles, looking for any advantage she could use. But James was positioned perfectly, close enough to kill Kael before she could reach him, with enough hostages to make any direct assault impossible. You're making a mistake, she said, trying to buy time. Killing us won't bring your brother back. No, James agreed, his eyes going distant with grief. But it might help me sleep at night. He raised the knife, preparing to draw it across Kael's throat, and time seemed to slow to a crawl. Aria could see her mate's resignation, his acceptance of the death that was coming. She could feel his love for her through the bond, his regret that they'd never had a chance to explore what they could have been.
No.
The word tore through her mind with absolute finality. She might lose everything, her pack, her family, her life, but she would not lose her mate. Not like this. Not when she'd just found him. Aria moved with speed that surprised even herself, drawing her gun and firing in one fluid motion. The bullet caught James in the shoulder, spinning him away from Kael and sending the silver knife flying into the underbrush. Sarah, now, she shouted, and her sniper's training kicked in. 3 more shots rang out in quick succession. The silver chains holding the hostages shattered, sending them tumbling to the ground. Chaos erupted in the clearing. Tom and David rushed to help the wounded Shadow Moon Pack members while Sarah kept her rifle trained on James, who was writhing on the ground and clutching his shoulder. But Aria only had eyes for Kael. She reached him just as he struggled to his feet, his legs shaky from the silver poisoning and blood loss. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest and breathing in his familiar scent. Are you all right? She whispered, her hands roaming over his body to assess his injuries. The silver burns, the reopened wound. I'm fine, he said roughly, his own arms coming up to hold her close. I'm fine now. For a moment, the world outside their embrace ceased to exist. The mate bond sang with completion, with the rightness of being together despite all the obstacles in their path. Aria felt tears streaming down her face as she realized this might be the first and last time she was able to hold him. I'm sorry, Kael murmured against her hair. I tried not to tell him anything, but the silver, the pain. It's okay, she assured him. It's not your fault. A harsh cough from nearby shattered their moment. Aria pulled back to see Sarah, David, and Tom staring at them with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to outright betrayal. So it's true, David said, his voice flat with condemnation. You're actually mated to him. David, I can explain. Explain what? Tom interrupted, his massive frame vibrating with barely contained rage. How you've been lying to us. How you've been consorting with the enemy while our pack members died. It's not like that, Aria protested, but she could see she was losing them. The 3 wolves she'd trusted with her life now looked at her like she was a stranger. Then what is it like? Sarah asked, her voice deadly quiet. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like our enforcer has been compromised by the very pack she's supposed to be fighting. Kael stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Aria in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. The mate bond isn't something either of us chose, he said, addressing her packmates directly. It's a gift from the moon goddess, and it doesn't recognize pack boundaries. Don't, Tom snarled, his wolf flashing behind his eyes. Don't you dare speak to us about the moon goddess, you murdering bastard. The insult hung in the air like a challenge, and Aria felt Kael's alpha authority surge in response. For a terrible moment, she thought the clearing was about to become a battlefield, with her caught in the middle between her mate and her packmates. Then James laughed. It was a broken, hysterical sound that made everyone turn toward where he lay bleeding on the forest floor. "This is perfect," he gasped between peals of maniacal laughter. "Better than I could have hoped for. Not only do I get to expose the truth, but I get to watch it tear both packs apart from the inside." "You're insane," Sarah said, her rifle still trained on the rogue wolf. "Maybe," James agreed. "But I'm not wrong. Look around you. Look at the doubt in their eyes, the way they're questioning everything they thought they knew." His gaze fixed on Aria with malicious glee. "How does it feel, knowing you've destroyed the very people you swore to protect?" The words hit Aria like physical blows, mainly because she feared they were true. She could see the doubt in her packmates' eyes, the way they were reassessing every interaction they'd had with her over the past few days. Her secret was out, and it was already poisoning everything she held dear. "We need to get back," David said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Alpha Helena needs to hear about this directly." Aria's heart sank. Helena, the woman who'd raised her, who'd trusted her with the pack's most sensitive missions. How could she possibly face her aunt knowing that her secret was about to tear the Shadow Moon pack apart? "Take James into custody," she said quietly, her training as an enforcer overriding her personal turmoil. "He's responsible for the death of 4 pack members and the torture of prisoners." "What about him?" Tom asked, jerking his chin toward Kael. Aria looked at her mate, bloodied, exhausted, but still radiating the quiet strength that had drawn her to him from the first moment. The smart thing would be to turn him over to Helena, to let pack justice take its course. But the mate bond wouldn't let her abandon him to almost certain death. "He goes free," she said, meeting Tom's shocked gaze. "He was a victim here, not a perpetrator." "Are you out of your mind?" David exploded. "He's the alpha of Crimson Falls. We can't just let him walk away." "Yes, we can." Aria's voice carried a note of finality that she rarely used, the tone that reminded everyone she was still their enforcer, still their superior in the pack hierarchy. "He goes free, and that's final." For a moment, she thought her packmates might challenge her directly. The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut with a knife, loyalty warring with duty, friendship struggling against betrayal. Then Sarah lowered her rifle. "You're the enforcer," she said quietly. "It's your call." It wasn't forgiveness, not by a long shot, but it was acceptance of her authority. Tom and David looked like they wanted to argue, but they eventually nodded their reluctant agreement. "Thank you," Kael said, and Aria could hear the genuine gratitude in his voice. "Don't thank me yet," she replied, her heart breaking with every word. "This doesn't change anything between us. We're still enemies, still on opposite sides of a war that's about to get much worse." Pain flashed across Kael's features, quickly replaced by understanding. He knew as well as she did that this moment of connection was likely their last. The revelation of their mate bond would force both packs to choose sides, and there was no scenario where they ended up together. "I know," he said simply, "but I want you to know, if circumstances were different." "I know," she whispered, blinking back fresh tears. "I know." They stared at each other for a long moment, memorizing faces and committing this impossible connection to memory. Then Kael stepped back, the alpha mask sliding back into place. "Tell your pack," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing to include her packmates, that Crimson Falls had nothing to do with James's actions. He went rogue, and his crimes are his alone. With that, he turned and disappeared into the forest, moving with the fluid grace of his wolf form. Aria watched him go, feeling like part of her soul was being ripped away with each step he took. "Come on," David said gruffly, hauling the semi-conscious James to his feet. "Let's go home." As they began the long journey back to Shadow Moon territory, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward her own execution. Her secret was out, her loyalty questioned, and the mate bond that should have been a blessing felt more like a curse. But worst of all, she knew that somewhere in the forest behind them, Kael was feeling the same devastating separation. The invisible thread that connected them was stretching to its breaking point, and soon, one way or another, it would snap completely. The only question was whether either of them would survive when it did. Chapter 4. The silence in Helena's office was suffocating. Aria sat in the leather chair across from her aunt's desk, her hands clenched in her lap as she waited for the judgment she knew was coming. 3 hours had passed since they'd returned from the forest with James in custody and the truth about her mate Bond exposed. 3 hours of whispered conversations, shocked stares, and the kind of tension that made her skin crawl. Helena stood with her back to the room, staring out the window at the training grounds where pack members moved through their evening routines with unusual intensity. Everyone was on edge, waiting to see how their alpha would handle this unprecedented situation. 15 years, Helena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 years I've been alpha of this pack, and I've never faced anything like this. Aunt Helena. Don't. Helena turned around, and Aria's heart broke at the pain etched across her aunt's features. Just don't speak yet. Let me process this. Aria bit back the words that wanted to spill out. Explanations, apologies, desperate pleas for understanding. Instead, she watched as the woman who'd raised her struggled with the impossible situation her niece had created. The mate Bond, Helena continued, moving to her desk but not sitting down. With Kael Crimson, the alpha of the pack that killed your parents. The Bond doesn't choose based on politics, Aria said quietly. You know that better than anyone. Helena's laugh was bitter. Do I? Because right now, I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about the moon goddess's wisdom. The word stung, but Aria couldn't blame her aunt for the doubt. She'd been questioning the same thing herself for 3 days, wondering what cosmic joke had paired her with her pack's greatest enemy. A soft knock interrupted the tense moment. Marcus peered around the door, his weathered face grim with concern. Helena? The pack council is assembled. They're demanding answers. Of course they are, Helena muttered, running a hand through her silver hair. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. Marcus nodded, but didn't leave immediately. His eyes found Aria's, and she could see the disappointment there. Not angry betrayal like her patrol team had shown, but deep, paternal disappointment that somehow felt worse. For what it's worth, he said softly, I still believe you're a good person, Aria. Misguided, maybe, but good. After he left, Helena finally sat down, suddenly looking every one of her 55 years. The council wants you stripped of your enforcer position, she said without preamble. Half of them want you exiled. The other half want you executed for treason. Aria's breath caught in her throat. She'd known there would be consequences, but execution? And what do you want? I want my sister back, Helena said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I want my brother-in-law's terrible jokes and Sunday family dinners and the life we had before the Crimson Falls pack destroyed everything. I want a lot of things I can't have. I know you're disappointed. Disappointed? Helena's voice cracked with emotion. Aria, you're my daughter in every way that matters. I raised you, I trained you, I trusted you with the most sensitive pack business. And now I find out you've been hiding this massive secret, this connection to our greatest enemy. I've been hiding it for 3 days, Aria protested. 3 days, not 3 years. I didn't ask for this to happen. No, but you chose how to handle it. Helena's pale eyes flashed with anger. You chose to keep it secret instead of coming to me immediately. You chose to let that monster live instead of doing your duty as an enforcer. The word monster sent a spike of protective rage through Aria's chest. He's not a monster. He saved my life. He's the alpha of the pack that murdered your parents. Helena roared, her composure finally cracking completely. How can you defend him? How can you feel anything for him besides hatred? Because of this. Aria pressed a hand to her chest where the mate bond pulsed with steady warmth. Because every instinct I have, every fiber of my being, recognizes him as mine. Because when I look at him, I don't see the enemy. I see the other half of my soul. The raw honesty in her words seemed to deflate Helena's anger. The alpha sank back in her chair, looking suddenly fragile. The council is going to want your head, she said quietly. They're scared, angry, and looking for someone to blame for all the chaos. You've become the perfect scapegoat. Then give it to them, Aria said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Strip me of my title, exile me from the pack. I'll accept whatever punishment they decide. You do that? You'd give up everything, your home, your family, your entire life, for a man you've known for 3 days. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with years of love and sacrifice and shared history. Aria thought about her childhood in this pack house, the training sessions with Helena, the family dinners with Marcus, and the other pack elders. She thought about the room upstairs that had been her sanctuary for 15 years, the wolves who'd been her brothers and sisters in everything but blood. Then she thought about storm-gray eyes and the scent of pine and leather. She thought about the way Kael had thrown himself in front of a bullet for her, the protective way he'd stepped in front of her when her packmates had turned hostile. She thought about the mate bond that sang in her chest every moment of every day, connecting her to a man who was supposed to be her enemy. Yes, she whispered. I would. Helena closed her eyes as if the admission was a physical blow. Then you're more like your mother than I thought. What do you mean? Your mother fell in love with your father the moment she met him, Helena said, a sad smile crossing her features. He was from a rival pack, not enemies like Crimson Falls, but there was bad blood between our territories. The elders forbade the match, said it would bring nothing but trouble. Aria stared at her aunt in shock. I never knew that. Because they chose love over politics. They eloped, joined a neutral pack, and only came back when I became alpha and could guarantee their safety. Helena's smile turned bitter. And look how that ended. They died defending this pack from the very kind of violence they'd tried to escape. The revelation hit Aria like a physical blow. Her parents had faced the same impossible choice she was facing now, love versus duty, heart versus pack loyalty. The fact that they'd chosen love and still ended up dead felt like a cosmic warning she couldn't ignore. The difference is, Helena continued, your father wasn't the alpha of the pack that was actively trying to kill us. He wasn't responsible for the deaths of our people. Neither is Kael, Aria said fiercely. Not directly. Pack conflicts are complicated, you know that. There's blood on both sides. Is there? Helena leaned forward, her alpha authority coming to the fore. Tell me, Aria, in all your conversations with your mate, has he expressed any regret for the Shadow Moon wolves his pack has killed? Any remorse for the pain he's caused? Aria opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The truth was, she and Kael had barely spoken beyond those few desperate moments in the forest. She knew almost nothing about his feelings regarding the pack war, his regrets, or his hopes for the future. She was defending a man she'd spent less than an hour with, based purely on the supernatural connection between them. I see the doubt in your eyes, Helena said gently. You don't really know him, do you? The mate bond. The mate bond creates attraction and connection, but it doesn't create character, Helena interrupted. It doesn't make someone a good person or a worthy partner. It just makes them yours. The words hit Aria like a slap. She wanted to argue, to defend the man who'd risked his life for her, but Helena's logic was sound. She was prepared to throw away everything for someone she barely knew, based on nothing more than supernatural chemistry. Before she could respond, urgent voices echoed from the hallway outside. Helena's head snapped up, her enhanced hearing picking up details that made her face go pale. What is it? Aria asked. Trouble, Helena replied grimly, rising from her chair. Big trouble. The office door burst open without ceremony, and Liam stumbled in with blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. His clothes were torn and muddy, and his eyes held the wild look of a man who'd barely escaped death. Liam. Aria jumped up, instinctively moving to help him, but he flinched away from her touch. Don't, he said harshly, the rejection clear in his voice. I can't, not after what I know now. The pain in his words cut deep, but Aria forced herself to focus on more pressing concerns. What happened? Where are you hurt? It's not my blood, Liam said, swaying slightly on his feet. Well, not all of it. We were ambushed at the northern border, 6 of us on routine patrol. They came out of nowhere. Who? Helena demanded, her alpha authority commanding immediate answers. Rogues? Crimson Falls wolves. Neither. Liam's expression was grim. They were wearing masks, but I caught scent signatures before I escaped. Mixed pack alliance, rogues, exiles, and at least 3 different pack territories. They're organized, well-armed, and they know our patrol patterns. Aria's blood ran cold. A mixed pack alliance was every territory's worst nightmare, a group of wolves with no loyalty to pack law or territorial boundaries, united only by whatever goal had brought them together. Survivors? Helena asked curtly. I don't know. I was knocked unconscious early in the fight, came to alone and covered in blood. Could be dead, could be captured. Liam's voice cracked slightly. I should have stayed to look for them, but I was outnumbered and— You did the right thing, Helena assured him. Getting back with intelligence was the priority. She turned to Aria, and for a moment, the earlier tension between them was forgotten in the face of pack crisis. I need you to organize search and rescue teams. Full combat gear, assume the worst. Aria nodded, already mentally cataloging available personnel and equipment. But before she could move toward the door, Liam spoke again. There's something else, he said, his eyes meeting Aria's with an expression she couldn't read. Something they said during the attack. What? Helena prompted when he hesitated. They mentioned you specifically, Aria. Said something about the she-wolf who breaks bonds and how you were going to be the key to everything. Liam's jaw tightened. I think this attack, whatever's happening, it's connected to your situation. The room went deadly silent. Aria felt the weight of both Helena's and Liam's stares, the accusation implicit in their expressions. Her mate bond, her impossible connection to Kael Crimson, had somehow drawn the attention of forces that threatened the entire pack. How could they possibly know about that? Helena asked, her voice dangerously quiet. James, Aria realized with growing horror. When we captured him, he was already half mad with grief and rage. If someone approached him, offered him revenge against both packs, he could have told them everything, Helena finished. About your connection to Kael, about the tensions between our territories, about our patrol schedules and defensive positions. The implications were staggering. James's knowledge of both pack territories, combined with his insider information about Shadow Moon operations, could have provided everything a hostile force would need to plan devastating attacks on both sides. It gets worse, Liam continued, his voice barely above a whisper. One of them, the leader I think, mentioned something about when the alphas fall. They're not just planning random attacks, they're targeting pack leadership. Helena's face went ashen. A coordinated assault on both alphas simultaneously would throw both territories into chaos. With no clear succession plans, the rogues could move in and claim both territories, Aria finished, the pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. They're not just trying to start a war, they're trying to destroy both packs entirely. The mate bond pulsed in her chest, and suddenly she could feel Kael's distress echoing through the connection. Somewhere across the forest, he was dealing with his own crisis, his own attacks and betrayals. The rogues weren't just targeting Shadow Moon, they were hitting Crimson Falls at the same time. I have to warn him, she said, starting toward the door. Absolutely not, Helena commanded, her alpha voice stopping Aria in her tracks. You're not going anywhere near Crimson Falls territory, especially not now. You don't understand. I can feel him through the bond. He's in danger, his pack is under attack. If we don't coordinate our defenses, then both packs fall separately instead of together, Helena interrupted. At least this way, we have a chance of survival. That's not true and you know it, Aria shot back, desperation making her reckless. These rogues have inside information on both packs. The only way we survive is if we work together. Work together with the pack that killed your parents? Liam's voice was incredulous. Aria, what has this mate bond done to you? You're talking about allying with our greatest enemies. They're not our enemies right now, Aria insisted. The rogues are. And if we don't put aside our differences long enough to deal with this threat, there won't be any packs left to fight each other. Helena was quiet for a long moment, her alpha instincts warring with years of ingrained hatred and mistrust. Finally, she turned to Liam. How many confirmed attackers in your encounter? She asked. At least 12, probably more. They had military-grade weapons and coordination that suggested serious training. Liam's expression was grim. This isn't some ragtag group of rogues, Helena. This is an organized force with resources and planning. And they're hitting both packs simultaneously, Helena mused, her strategic mind working through the implications. Which means they have enough personnel and equipment to mount multiple operations. At least 50 wolves, maybe more, Aria estimated. Against our combined 43 and whatever Crimson Falls has left after their recent losses. We're outnumbered, Helena concluded grimly. Not if we work together, Aria pressed. Combined, we might have a chance. Separated, we're both doomed. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. Outside, Aria could hear the sounds of the pack mobilizing, warriors grabbing weapons, sentries doubling patrols, families gathering their children into secure areas. Everyone could sense the approaching storm. Finally, Helena looked up, her pale eyes meeting Aria's with a mixture of resignation and determination. If I agree to this, she said slowly, if I authorize contact with Crimson Falls for a temporary alliance, what guarantee do I have that they won't use this crisis as an opportunity to destroy us? You have my word, Aria said immediately. Your word? Liam scoffed. Your word about the pack you've been mated to for 3 days? The alpha you barely know. I know enough, Aria said fiercely. I know he risked his life to save mine. I know he could have killed me a dozen times in that forest and chose not to. I know that whatever else he is, he's not a coward who would use an external threat to attack weakened allies. That's not knowing, Helena said gently. That's hoping. Then let me go to him, Aria pleaded. Let me make contact and find out for certain. If I'm wrong, if this is some elaborate trap, then I'll be the only casualty. But if I'm right, if you're right, we might all survive this, Helena finished. Another long silence fell over the room. Aria could practically see the calculations running through her aunt's mind, the risks versus the potential rewards, the dangers of trusting their enemies against the certainty of destruction if they stood alone. If you go, Helena said finally, you go as an exile. Officially, the Shadow Moon Pact disavows any connection to your actions. If this backfires, if Crimson Falls uses your presence to justify attacking us, you take full responsibility. The words hit Aria like physical blows. Exile meant giving up everything, her home, her family, her identity as a Shadow Moon wolf. It meant burning every bridge behind her with no guarantee that she'd find anything worth having on the other side. But the mate bond pulsed in her chest, and she could feel Kael's continued distress, his pack's desperate struggle against forces that threatened everything he held dear. If there was even a chance she could help save both packs, the sacrifice would be worth it. I understand, she said quietly. Aria, no. Liam stepped forward, his earlier anger replaced by genuine concern. You can't throw your life away like this. There has to be another option. There isn't, she replied, meeting his eyes with as much kindness as she could muster. You know there isn't. Helena stood slowly, her movements heavy with the weight of the decision she was making. Aria Blackwood, by the authority vested in me as Alpha of the Shadow Moon Pack, I hereby exile you from this territory and dissolve all bonds of loyalty and obligation between you and this pack. The formal words echoed through the room like a death sentence. Aria felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, not the mate bond, which continued to pulse with steady warmth, but something else. The pack bonds that had connected her to every wolf in the territory for 26 years suddenly snapped, leaving her feeling strangely empty and disconnected. However, Helena continued, her voice softening slightly, should you succeed in forging an alliance that saves both our territories, the Shadow Moon Pack will welcome you back with full honors. And if you don't... If I don't, it won't matter anyway, Aria finished. Because we'll all be dead. Helena nodded grimly. Marcus will escort you to the border. After that, you're on your own. As Aria turned to leave, Liam caught her arm. Be careful, he said quietly. Whatever else has happened between us, I don't want to lose you entirely. The gentleness in his voice nearly broke her resolve. This was what she was giving up. The people who'd loved her despite her flaws, who'd stood by her through every challenge and triumph. She was trading the known for the unknown, security for a chance at something that might not even exist. "Take care of each other," she whispered, then walked out of the office without looking back. As she gathered her few belongings and prepared to leave the only home she'd ever known, one thought kept echoing through her mind. She was about to discover whether the mate bond was strong enough to bridge not just the gap between enemies, but the chasm between hope and reality. The answer would determine whether she'd found her destiny or sealed her doom. Chapter 5. The forest felt different without pack bonds. As Aria made her way through the dense undergrowth toward Crimson Falls territory, every shadow seemed more menacing, every sound more threatening. For 26 years, she'd carried the subtle awareness of her packmates in the back of her mind, a comforting presence that whispered you belong, you are not alone. Now that connection was severed, leaving her feeling strangely hollow and vulnerable. But the mate bond burned stronger than ever, pulling her eastward with increasing intensity. She could feel Kael's distress more clearly now, as if the absence of other pack connections had amplified their supernatural link. His pain echoed through her chest, physical exhaustion, emotional turmoil, and underneath it all, a desperate determination that made her heart race. "Hold on," she thought, hoping somehow the message would reach him through their bond. "I'm coming." The autumn air was crisp against her face as she shifted into her wolf form, her bones cracking and reforming with practiced ease. As a wolf, she could cover ground faster and more quietly, her enhanced senses picking up dangers long before they became threats. She'd need every advantage she could get. Enemy territory was no place for a lone wolf, especially one carrying intelligence about coordinated attacks. 3 hours into her journey, the scent hit her like a physical blow.
Blood. Fear. Death.
Aria's wolf form went rigid as the metallic tang filled her nostrils, accompanied by the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder. Somewhere ahead, a battle had taken place, recently, judging by the freshness of the scent markers. She crept forward through the underbrush, her heart hammering as the smells grew stronger. The clearing she discovered looked like a war zone. Trees were scarred with bullet holes and claw marks, the ground churned up and stained dark with blood. Bodies lay scattered across the forest floor, wolves in both human and animal form, their lifeless eyes staring at the canopy above. But these weren't Crimson Falls wolves. Aria's enhanced senses picked up the scent signatures of rogues, exiles, and unfamiliar pack territories. The attacking force Liam had described had been here, and from the looks of things, they'd been defeated, but at a terrible cost. A low groan from the edge of the clearing made her freeze. Someone was still alive. Aria shifted back to human form and approached cautiously, her hand instinctively moving to the silver knife at her hip. The sound had come from behind a fallen log where a figure lay crumpled and bleeding. It was a Crimson Falls wolf, a woman about her own age with short auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes that were currently clouded with pain. Her left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and deep claw marks decorated her torso, but she was conscious and alert. "Don't," the woman gasped, trying to push herself upright when she saw Aria approaching. "Don't come any closer." "I'm not going to hurt you," Aria said gently, raising her hands to show she was unarmed. "My name is Aria Blackwood. I'm here to help." The woman's eyes widened with recognition and fear. "Blackwood? Your shadow moon. What are you doing in our territory?" "Looking for your alpha," Aria replied honestly. "There's something he needs to know about these attacks." "Alpha Kael?" The woman struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement aggravated her injuries. He was here when the attack started. Led the counter-assault personally." Her expression grew grim. "But that was hours ago. If he's not here now..." Aria's heart clenched with fear. Where would he go? Where would he take survivors? "The pack house," the woman said without hesitation. "If there are survivors. But you can't go there, your shadow moon. They'll kill you on sight." "They'll try," Aria corrected grimly. What's your name?
Sarah.
Sarah Chun.
I
I was third in the pack hierarchy.
was.
The word hung between them with ominous implications. What happened here, Sarah? Aria knelt beside the injured woman, assessing her wounds with the clinical detachment of her enforcer training. Who were they? Rogues, mostly, but organized like nothing I've ever seen. They knew our patrol schedules, our defensive positions, even which wolves would be where. Sarah's voice grew bitter. Someone fed them detailed intelligence about our operations. James Cortez, Aria said grimly. A rogue from your pack who's been working with hostile forces. He had similar information about Shadow Moon operations. Sarah's eyes sharpened despite her pain. Both packs are being targeted.
Exactly.
That's why I'm here. Aria pulled off her jacket and began tearing it into strips for makeshift bandages. Your pack and mine need to work together, or we're both going to be destroyed. Work together? Sarah let out a laugh that was more pain than humor. Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls united? You'd have better luck convincing the sun to rise in the west. Maybe, Aria agreed, carefully wrapping Sarah's worst wounds. But the alternative is extinction for both packs. As she worked, Sarah studied her with curious eyes. Why are you doing this? Helping me, I mean. I'm your enemy. Aria's hands stilled for a moment. Because right now, the rogues are our mutual enemy. And because. She struggled to find words that wouldn't sound insane. Because I have reasons to believe our packs can trust each other. What kind of reasons? Before Aria could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles made them both freeze. Through the trees, she could see headlights cutting through the gathering dusk, multiple vehicles moving fast and coordinated. Rogues, Aria whispered. Sarah listened intently, then shook her head. Crimson Falls. I recognized the engine's sounds. Her expression grew urgent. You need to run.
Now.
When they see you here with me, with all these bodies, they'll assume I'm responsible for the attack. Aria finished. I know, but she didn't move. Running would accomplish nothing. She'd still need to reach Kael somehow, and leaving Sarah alone and wounded felt wrong on a fundamental level. There's another option, she said slowly. What? You could vouch for me. Tell them I helped you, that I'm here with information about the attacks. Sarah stared at her in disbelief. You want me to risk my life and reputation to protect a Shadow Moon wolf? I want you to help me save both our packs, Aria corrected. But yes, I'm asking you to trust me. The vehicles were getting closer, their headlights beginning to pierce the clearing. In moments, Crimson Falls reinforcements would discover them, and Aria would be faced with a pack of grief-stricken, angry wolves who would see her as either a threat or a convenient target for their rage. This is insane, Sarah muttered, then louder. All right. I'll vouch for you. But if this goes wrong, we'll both be dead, Aria interrupted. So, let's make sure it doesn't. The first vehicle broke through the tree line, its headlights illuminating the carnage in stark detail. Doors slammed as armed wolves poured out, their weapons trained on the clearing as they swept for threats. Contact, one of them shouted, spotting Aria and Sarah near the fallen log. 2 survivors, 1 injured. More wolves emerged from the vehicles, and Aria's enhanced hearing picked up their rapid-fire conversations. Massive casualties. Alpha's orders were to secure the area. That's not one of ours. Shadow Moon sent, she's enemy. Stand down. Sarah's voice cut through the chatter with the authority of her rank. Despite her injuries, she managed to project the kind of command presence that made trained warriors listen. Stand down. She's with me. A figure emerged from the lead vehicle that made Aria's breath catch in her throat. Even in the harsh glare of the headlights, even exhausted and bloodied from battle, Kael Crimson was magnificent. His dark hair was disheveled, his clothes torn and stained, but his storm-gray eyes were as intense as ever. Those eyes found hers across the clearing, and the mate bond exploded to life with such force that she gasped audibly. Relief, joy, desperate longing. All of it crashed through their connection like a tidal wave. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, connected by an invisible thread that distance and danger couldn't break. Then reality reasserted itself, and Kael's expression shifted from relief to confusion to carefully controlled anger. "What?" he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha. "Is a shadow moon wolf doing in my territory?" "She saved my life," Sarah said firmly, struggling to her feet with obvious pain. "The rogues left me for dead, but she found me and treated my wounds." Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves: surprise, suspicion, confusion. Several weapons remained trained on Aria, but the immediate threat of execution seemed to have passed. "That doesn't explain what she's doing here in the first place," said a man Aria recognized as David Reeves, the previous Alpha son and current Beta of Crimson Falls. His brown eyes were hard with suspicion and barely controlled grief. "I have information," Aria said, stepping forward despite the weapons still pointed at her. "About the attacks on both our packs. About who's behind them and what they're planning." "Both our packs." Kael's eyes sharpened. "Shadow Moon was attacked too?" 3 hours ago. Northern Border Patrol, 6 wolves. They're using the same tactics, the same coordination." Aria met his gaze directly, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "This isn't random rogue violence. It's a coordinated assault designed to destroy both our territories." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Aria could see the wheels turning in Kael's mind as he processed the information, calculating the scope of the threat they were all facing. "Sir," one of the younger wolves spoke up hesitantly. "What if it's a trick? What if Shadow Moon sent her to gather intelligence or spread misinformation?" "Then she picked a hell of a way to do it," Sarah interjected. "Showing up alone in hostile territory to bandage enemy wounded? That's either the most elaborate suicide mission in history or exactly what it appears to be." Kael studied Aria for a long moment, and she could feel him probing their mate bond, trying to sense deception or hidden motives. What he found there made his expression soften slightly. "David, get Sarah to the medical unit," he ordered. "Full priority treatment." Then, to his assembled wolves, "Secure the perimeter and collect our dead. I want a full casualty report within the hour." "What about her?" David asked, jerking his chin toward Aria. Kael's eyes met hers again, and she could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Alpha duty warred with mate bond, pack loyalty fought against the pull of destiny. "She comes with us," he said finally. "Under guard, pending interrogation." It wasn't exactly the warm welcome Aria had hoped for, but it was better than summary execution. As Crimson Falls wolves moved to secure the area, she found herself flanked by 2 guards who clearly took their duty seriously. "This is a mistake," David muttered as they loaded Sarah into one of the vehicles. "She's Shadow Moon. We can't trust her." "Maybe," Kael agreed. "But if she's telling the truth about coordinated attacks, we need to hear what she knows." As they drove through the forest toward the Crimson Falls packhouse, Aria tried to organize her thoughts. She had one chance to convince these wolves that cooperation was their only hope for survival. One opportunity to bridge decades of hatred and mistrust. The mate bond pulsed steadily in her chest, connecting her to the man sitting in the front seat, the alpha who held the fate of both packs in his hands. She could feel his conflict, his desire to trust her warring with years of conditioning and responsibility to his people. "Please," she thought, hoping the message would somehow reach him. "Please give me a chance to prove this can work." When the pack house came into view, a sprawling log structure that looked more like a fortress than a home, Aria's heart sank. The building was surrounded by armed guards, barriers, and defensive positions that spoke of a pack under siege. These weren't wolves who were ready to trust anyone, let alone their oldest enemies. But as they pulled up to the main entrance, Kael turned to look at her one more time. In his storm-gray eyes, she saw something that gave her hope, not acceptance, not trust, but curiosity. He wanted to hear what she had to say. It would have to be enough. "Welcome to Crimson Falls," he said quietly as the vehicle stopped. "Try not to get killed." As armed guards escorted her toward the packhouse entrance, Aria couldn't help but think that surviving the next few hours would be the easy part. The real challenge would be convincing a pack of grieving, angry wolves to trust the one person they had every reason to hate. But the mate bond sang in her chest, and for the first time since leaving Shadow Moon territory, Chapter 6, Alliance of Necessity. The Crimson Falls pack house was nothing like Aria had expected. Instead of the cold, militaristic compound she'd imagined, the interior was warm and welcoming, polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and family photos covering the walls. It felt like a home, which somehow made her presence here as an enemy even more surreal. Her guards led her through corridors buzzing with activity as pack members rushed to tend wounded, coordinate defenses, and process the aftermath of the attack. Children peered around doorways with wide, curious eyes before being quickly ushered away by protective parents. The scent of fear and grief hung heavy in the air, mixing with the antiseptic smell of medical supplies and the metallic tang of blood. "In here," one of her escorts said, opening a door to what appeared to be a conference room. A long wooden table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs that had seen better days. Maps covered one wall, marked with colored pins and strategic notations that spoke of careful defensive planning. Kael was already there, standing with his back to the door as he studied the largest map. He'd changed clothes since the clearing, the torn and bloodied tactical gear replaced by jeans and a black sweater that emphasized the powerful lines of his shoulders. When he turned to face her, Aria's breath caught in her throat. Up close, without the chaos of battle and the glare of headlights, she could see the toll the attacks had taken on him. Dark circles shadowed his storm-gray eyes, and new lines of stress bracketed his mouth. But it was the raw pain she glimpsed in his expression that made her heart ache, the look of a leader who'd watched his people die and couldn't save them all. "Leave us," he told the guards quietly. "Sir, are you sure?" one of them began. "Leave us," Kael repeated, his alpha authority brooking no argument. After the door closed behind the departing guards, silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Aria stood near the table, hyper-aware of every detail, the way Kael's hands flexed at his sides, the careful distance he maintained between them, the mate bond humming with tension in the space where they should have been touching. "You came," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I had to." Aria met his gaze directly, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "Both our packs are in danger. This is bigger than our territorial dispute." "So you said." Kael moved closer, and she caught his scent, pine and leather with underlying notes of exhaustion and stress. "Tell me about the Shadow Moon attack." "Everything." So she did. She described Liam's injuries and his account of the ambush, the military precision of the attackers, their apparent knowledge of patrol schedules and defensive positions. With each detail, Kael's expression grew grimmer. "The same tactics they used against us," he confirmed when she finished. "Same coordination, same inside knowledge. They knew exactly when and where to hit for maximum damage." "James Cortez," Aria said. "He had access to intelligence from both packs. If someone recruited him, offered him revenge, he could have provided everything they needed." Kael turned back to the map, his finger tracing the marked positions. "We lost 12 wolves in the first wave. Another 8 in the counterattack." The number hit Aria like a physical blow. 20 Crimson Falls wolves dead in a single day, more casualties than either pack had suffered in years of border skirmishes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Kael's shoulders tensed. "Are you? These are the same wolves your pack has been trying to kill for the better part of a decade." The accusation stung, mainly because it held a grain of truth. How many times had she hoped for Crimson Falls casualties during their conflicts? How many times had she celebrated their losses as victories for her pack? "They were," she admitted. "But that was before I understood what we're really facing. This isn't about territory anymore, Kael. It's about survival." He turned to study her, his storm-gray eyes searching her face for deception. "And what exactly are you proposing?" "An alliance. Temporary, focused purely on eliminating the rogue threat." Aria stepped closer to the table, pointing to the marked positions on the map. "Your pack has superior defensive positions and firepower. Mine has better intelligence networks and tracking capabilities. Together, we might actually have a chance." "Together," Kael repeated, his voice heavy with skepticism. Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls, fighting side by side. Do you have any idea how impossible that sounds? About as impossible as sworn enemies being fated mates, Aria replied quietly. The mate bond flared between them at her words, filling the room with electric tension. Kael's pupils dilated as he fought the pull that wanted to draw them together, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. That, he said through gritted teeth, is exactly why this won't work. How can I ask my pack to trust yours when I can barely trust my own judgment around you? The raw honesty in his admission made Aria's chest tighten with emotion. Because your judgment is sound, she said. You're not proposing this alliance because of the mate bond. You're considering it because it's the smart tactical decision. The bond just makes it easier to trust that I'm telling the truth. Before Kael could respond, the conference room door burst open. David Reeves strode in, his brown eyes blazing with anger and suspicion. This is insane, he announced without preamble. The Pack Council is in an uproar. Half of them want her executed immediately, and the other half want her tortured for information first. Good thing the Pack Council doesn't make tactical decisions during crises, Kael replied calmly. I do. Kael, you can't seriously be considering this. David moved to stand beside his alpha, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. She's Shadow Moon. Her pack killed your parents, your sister, dozens of our people over the years. And now you want to invite them into our territory as allies. Aria's blood turned to ice. Kael's parents and sister, she'd known about the casualties from various skirmishes, but she hadn't realized the personal losses he'd suffered. The weight of that knowledge settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. My family's deaths don't change the tactical situation, Kael said, his voice carefully controlled. If anything, they make it more important that we survive this threat. Or maybe they make it impossible for you to think clearly about anything involving Shadow Moon, David shot back. Especially her. The accusation hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Aria could see the doubt creeping into Kael's expression, the way David's words were undermining the fragile trust they'd been building. He's right, she said quietly, drawing both men's attention. About your family, I mean. I didn't know about your sister. Kael's jaw tightened. Her name was Emma. She was 19 when your pack killed her during a border raid 3 years ago. The words hit Aria like physical blows. She remembered that raid, remembered the chaos and confusion, the way it had escalated beyond anyone's control. She'd been there, had fought alongside the wolves who— I was there, she whispered, the admission tearing at her throat. I was part of that raid. The silence that followed was deafening. David's expression shifted from anger to vindication, while Kael went perfectly still in a way that was infinitely more frightening than rage. You killed my sister, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Aria replied honestly, hating herself for the truth. It was chaos. Everyone was fighting, people were dying on both sides. I can't tell you I didn't fire the shot that killed her, and I can't tell you I did. Jesus Christ, David breathed. This is what you want to ally with? The woman who might have murdered Emma? Kael stared at Aria for a long moment, and she could feel their mate bond straining under the weight of this revelation. Everything they'd been building, every moment of trust and connection, was crumbling under the reality of their shared history. Get out, Kael said quietly. Kael, Aria started. Get out, he roared, his alpha authority hitting her like a physical force. The command was so powerful that Aria's body moved before her mind could protest. She stumbled toward the door, her legs shaky and her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Wait, David called after her. Where do you think you're going? Away from here, Aria managed. This was a mistake. The Alliance coming here, all of it. You're not going anywhere, David said grimly. You're a security risk now. You've seen our defenses, our casualty numbers, our strategic positions. We can't just let you walk back to Shadow Moon with that intelligence. Aria's heart sank as she realized the truth of his words. She'd come here hoping to save both packs, and instead she'd trapped herself in enemy territory with no way home and no hope of completing her mission. So, what are you suggesting? She asked. Detention until this crisis is resolved, David replied. One way or another. Before Aria could respond, urgent voices echoed from the hallway outside. A young wolf burst through the door, his face flushed with exertion and fear. Alpha, he gasped. We have a problem. A big one. What now? Kael asked wearily. Perimeter scouts just reported movement on the southern border. Large force, moving this way fast. At least 30 rogues, maybe more. The messenger swallowed hard. They'll be here within the hour. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. 30 rogues against a pack already decimated by the earlier attack. It would be a massacre. How many defenders? Do we have combat ready? David asked. 18, the messenger replied grimly. Everyone else is either wounded, dead, or protecting the non-combatants. 18 against 30. Even with their defensive advantages, the odds were impossible. Sir, the messenger continued hesitantly, there's something else. The scouts identified the leader of the rogue force. Who? Kael demanded. James Cortez. And he's carrying a Shadow Moon Pack banner. Aria's blood turned to ice as she understood the implications. He's going to frame Shadow Moon for the attack, she breathed. Make it look like we're the ones finishing you off. Which means even if any of us survive, David said grimly, it'll start the war he's been trying to create all along. Kael stared at the tactical map, his mind racing through possibilities that all ended in disaster. Finally, he looked up at Aria, his storm gray eyes filled with a pain that went far beyond physical wounds. 18 defenders, he said quietly, against 30 attackers who know our defenses and our weaknesses. It's not enough, David admitted. No, Kael agreed. It's not. He was quiet for another moment, the weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. But what if it wasn't just 18 defenders? What do you mean? David asked. Kael's gaze met Aria's across the room. You said Shadow Moon was also attacked. How many combat-ready wolves do they have left? Maybe 20, Aria replied, her heart beginning to race as she understood where this was going. But they're miles away, and even if they were willing to help. They might be, Kael interrupted, if they knew the alternative was being framed for genocide. You can't be serious, David said. You want to call Shadow Moon for backup? I want to survive, Kael replied grimly. And right now, that means putting aside personal grievances for the greater good. He turned to Aria, and she could see the internal war playing out in his expression. Everything he'd been raised to believe, every instinct bred into him by years of conflict, was screaming at him not to trust her. But the mate bond was there too, singing beneath the surface, whispering that she was worth the risk. Can you contact your pack? He asked. Maybe, Aria said cautiously. But after what I told you about Emma, about my involvement in that raid. I know what you told me, Kael said quietly. And I know what the tactical situation is. Right now, the second consideration outweighs the first. So, you'll accept Shadow Moon assistance? Aria could hardly believe what she was hearing. I'll accept your assistance, Kael clarified. You're not Shadow Moon anymore, remember? You're an exile, acting on your own authority. The distinction was important. It would give both alphas plausible deniability if the alliance went wrong. But it also meant Aria was taking all the risk, gambling everything on a plan that might still end with both packs destroyed. There's no guarantee they'll come, she warned. Helena exiled me for a reason. She might see this as my problem to solve. Then you'd better be very persuasive, Kael said grimly. As Aria pulled out her phone to make the most important call of her life, she couldn't help but think about how drastically everything had changed. An hour ago, she'd been a prisoner facing detention or death. Now she was potentially the key to both packs' survival. The irony wasn't lost on her. She might have killed Kael's sister, might be responsible for some of the worst pain in his life, but she was also the only person who could save his pack from annihilation. Love and hate, enemy and ally, salvation and destruction. The lines between them had never felt thinner. As the phone began to ring, connecting her to Helena and the Shadow Moon Pack, Aria sent up a silent prayer to whatever forces governed the fates of wolves and the bonds between them. Please, She thought desperately. Please let this work. Because if it didn't, the next hour would see the end of everything she'd ever cared about. She felt something that might have been hope. Chapter 6. The phone rang twice before Helena's voice came through, sharp with worry and exhaustion. Aria? Thank the moon goddess. We've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you safe? For now, Aria replied, acutely aware of Kael and David listening to every word. Helena, I need you to listen carefully. Crimson Falls is about to be attacked by the same rogue force that hit our northern patrol. 30 wolves, led by James Cortez, and they're carrying Shadow Moon banners. Silence stretched across the line for several seconds. They're framing us, Helena said finally, her voice tight with understanding.
Exactly.
When Crimson Falls falls, and they will fall, they only have 18 combat-ready defenders. It'll look like we finished them off. The surviving packs in the region will unite against us, and we'll be wiped out within a week. How long do we have? Helena's alpha training was taking over, pushing personal concerns aside for tactical necessities. Less than an hour before the attack begins. Maybe 6 hours before the massacre is discovered and blamed on us. Aria took a deep breath. Helena, I'm asking, no, I'm begging you to send reinforcements. Help Crimson Falls survive, and we might all live through this. You're asking me to send my wolves into enemy territory to defend the pack that killed your parents, Helena said slowly. The pack that's been trying to destroy us for a decade. I'm asking you to save both our packs from extinction, Aria corrected. Another pause, longer this time. Aria could practically hear her aunt weighing options, calculating risks, struggling with a decision that would define her legacy as alpha. How do I know this isn't some elaborate trap? Helena asked finally. How do I know you haven't been compromised, turned against us? It was a fair question, and Aria couldn't blame her aunt for the suspicion. Everything about this situation defied logic and decades of established hostility. Because you know me, Aria said simply. You raised me. You know I would never betray the pack, no matter what personal conflicts I'm facing. Personal conflicts, Helena repeated. Like being mated to their alpha? The words hit the room like a bombshell. David's eyes went wide with shock, while Kael went perfectly still. Aria realized with growing horror that she'd never actually told the Crimson Falls wolves about the mate bond. They'd been operating on suspicion and James's accusations, but not confirmed knowledge. It's true then, David breathed. You're actually mated to him. Kael's storm-gray eyes met hers across the room, and she could see the complex mix of emotions playing out in their depths. Pain over Emma's death was still there, but underneath it was something else, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, the bond between them could bridge the chasm of their shared history. Helena, Aria said into the phone, I know how this looks. I know what you're thinking. But the mate bond doesn't change my loyalty to Shadow Moon. It just means I have a chance to save both packs instead of watching them destroy each other. Does he feel the same way? Helena asked quietly. Aria looked at Kael again, searching his expression for any hint of his thoughts. What she saw there made her breath catch. Not the cold calculation of an alpha making tactical decisions, but something warmer and infinitely more complex. I think so, she whispered. Put me on speaker, Helena commanded. Aria hesitated, then activated the phone's speaker function. Helena's voice filled the room with alpha authority that even enemy wolves had to respect. Kael Crimson, Helena said formally. I am Helena Blackwood, alpha of the Shadow Moon Pack. I understand you're facing an imminent attack. That's correct, Kael replied, moving closer to the phone. 30 rogues, ETA 45 minutes. They're using your pack's banners to frame you for whatever happens here. And you're requesting Shadow Moon assistance to repel this attack. I am. Why? The question was deceptively simple, but Aria could hear the weight behind it. Helena was asking Kael to justify trusting the pack he'd been raised to hate. Kael was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Aria's face. When he spoke, his voice carried a conviction that surprised everyone in the room. Because your niece risked everything to warn us, he said. Because she gave up her home, her family, and her pack to try to save people she'd been taught to consider enemies. If she can show that kind of courage, that kind of faith in the possibility of peace, then maybe the rest of us can too. David stared at his alpha in shock, but Helena's response was immediate. How many defenders can you field? She asked. 18 combat ready, another 12 walking wounded, who can still fight if necessary. 30 total against 30 attackers. Still not great odds, but manageable. Helena's voice grew brisk with tactical planning. I can have 20 wolves at your location within 30 minutes. Armed and ready for coordinated defense. Helena, Aria interrupted. What about the Pack Council? What about all the wolves who wanted me executed this morning? The Pack Council will adapt, Helena said with grim amusement. Amazing how quickly political differences disappear when survival is on the line. Besides, Marcus made an excellent point during the emergency session, which was that if we let Crimson Falls be destroyed and framed for it, we'll spend the rest of our very short lives fighting every pack in the region. Better to make one ally than face a dozen enemies. Kael stepped closer to the phone. Alpha Blackwood, I want to be clear about something. This alliance is temporary, focused purely on the current threat. Once the rogue situation is resolved, our packs will need to negotiate a more permanent arrangement. Understood, Helena agreed. But Kael? When those negotiations happen, they'll be between equals. Not enemies, not victors and vanquished, but equals who fought together and survived together. The implications of that statement weren't lost on anyone in the room. Helena was essentially proposing to end a decade of warfare with a single joint military operation. Agreed, Kael said without hesitation. Excellent. My wolves are mobilizing now. Aria, I assume you'll coordinate the tactical integration. Aria looked at Kael, who nodded grimly. I'll coordinate, she confirmed.
Good.
And Aria? When this is over, you come home. Exile rescinded, full honors restored. The pack needs its enforcer. Tears blurred Aria's vision as Helena's words hit her. Home. After everything that had happened, everything she'd sacrificed, she could still go home. Thank you, she whispered. Thank me by keeping everyone alive, Helena replied. I'll see you both in a few hours. The line went dead, leaving the three of them in stunned silence. Outside, Aria could hear the sounds of the Crimson Falls pack preparing for battle, weapons being distributed, defensive positions being manned, families being moved to secure areas. This is insane, David said finally. 6 hours ago, we were planning raids against their border positions. Now we're inviting them into our territory as allies. War makes for strange partnerships, Kael replied absently, his attention focused on the tactical map. Aria, your people, what are their specialties? How do we best integrate them with our defensive strategy? For the next 20 minutes, they worked together with the focused intensity of professionals facing impossible odds. Personal conflicts and emotional baggage were set aside in favor of tactical necessities, weapon assignments, communication protocols, coordinated firing positions. Aria found herself impressed by Kael's strategic mind. He absorbed information quickly, adapted plans on the fly, and showed the kind of leadership that inspired confidence even in desperate circumstances. She could see why his pack followed him with such loyalty. Movement on the perimeter, someone called from the hallway. Vehicles approaching from the west. All three of them tensed, but Aria's enhanced hearing picked up familiar engine sounds. That's Helena, she said. I recognize her vehicle. They moved to the front of the pack house, where armed Crimson Falls wolves watched nervously as a convoy of Shadow Moon vehicles approached. The lead SUV stopped 20 feet away, and Helena emerged with the fluid grace of a born alpha. She was flanked by Marcus and a dozen other wolves Aria knew well, warriors who'd trained with her, friends who'd stood by her through countless challenges. Seeing them now, armed and ready to fight beside their oldest enemies, filled her with a pride she couldn't have imagined feeling a week ago. Alpha Crimson, Helena said formally, approaching with her hands visible and non-threatening. Thank you for trusting us with this alliance. Alpha Blackwood, Kael replied with equal formality. Thank you for honoring it. The two alphas studied each other with the careful attention of natural predators meeting for the first time. Both were strong leaders accustomed to absolute authority, Both had lost people to the ongoing conflict between their packs. The tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Helena extended her hand. Kael stared at it for a moment, and Aria held her breath. This simple gesture would either cement their alliance or expose it as the fragile pretense it might still be. Finally, Kael reached out and clasped Helena's hand. The mate bond in Aria's chest flared to life as the connection was made, not just between the two alphas, but between their entire packs. "Let's go save our people," Helena said grimly. The next 15 minutes were a whirlwind of coordinated preparation. Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves worked together with the efficiency of soldiers who knew their lives depended on cooperation. Weapon assignments were confirmed, communication channels established, defensive positions reinforced. Aria found herself moving between groups, translating tactical preferences and smoothing over the inevitable friction that came from trying to merge two different military doctrines on the fly. The wolves on both sides looked to her for guidance, recognizing her unique position as the bridge between their two worlds. "Contact," the perimeter scout's voice crackled through their radios. "Large force moving in from the south. Multiple vehicles, estimated 30+ hostiles. ETA 5 minutes." The preparations intensified, voices becoming sharper and movements more urgent. Aria took her position at one of the second-floor windows, her rifle loaded with silver rounds and her comm system connected to both command frequencies. "All stations, this is Alpha Crimson." Kael's voice came through the radio. "Hostiles are approaching from multiple vectors. Wait for my command to engage." "All Shadow Moon units, acknowledge Alpha Crimson's tactical authority," Helena added. "We follow his lead until the threat is neutralized." A chorus of acknowledgments filled the airwaves. Aria couldn't help but marvel at what they'd accomplished. Two packs that had been killing each other for years now working together with military precision. Through her scope, she caught her first glimpse of the approaching rogue force. They moved with the same coordinated efficiency she'd seen in the earlier attacks, but there was something different about them now. They carried Shadow Moon banners prominently, making sure their false allegiance would be clearly visible to any survivors or investigators. "There," she breathed into her mic, identifying James Cortez in the lead vehicle. "Target Alpha, lead SUV, passenger seat." "That's James Cortez, the rogue coordinator." "Confirmed," came Kael's voice. "All snipers, priority target is the passenger in the lead vehicle. Take the shot when you have it." The vehicles entered the kill zone, moving with the confidence of attackers who believed they faced only 18 defenders. Aria's finger tightened on the trigger as James's vehicle came into optimal range. "All units," Kael's voice was calm despite the circumstances, "engage." The night erupted in gunfire. Aria's first shot took out the lead vehicle's front tire, sending it spinning off the road and into a tree. Her second shot found James Cortez as he stumbled from the wreckage, catching him center mass and dropping him to the ground. Around her, the combined firepower of both packs created a devastating crossfire that caught the rogue force completely off guard. They'd expected to face a demoralized, depleted pack. Instead, they found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by a coordinated defense force. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When the last hostile was down and the final gunshot echoed away into silence, Aria felt something she'd never experienced before, the profound satisfaction of victory achieved through cooperation rather than conquest. "All stations report," Kael commanded. "Perimeter secure," came the replies from multiple positions. "Hostiles neutralized, no friendly casualties." No casualties. Against a force that had already devastated both packs separately, they'd achieved a complete victory without losing a single wolf. "Well," Helena's voice came through the radio with dry amusement, "that was unexpectedly efficient." As the all-clear was given and wolves began emerging from their positions, Aria found herself face-to-face with Kael in the main hallway. The immediate crisis was over, but the larger questions remained. What happened now? Could this temporary alliance survive the transition to peace? "We did it," she said quietly. "We did," he agreed, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the same amazement she felt. "Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls, fighting together. I never thought I'd see the day." Neither did I. Aria stepped closer, drawn by the mate bond that had been singing with satisfaction throughout the battle. Kael, about what I said earlier about Emma? Don't, he interrupted gently. Not now. Right now, I just want to appreciate the fact that both our packs are still alive. She nodded, understanding. There would be time later for difficult conversations and painful reckonings. Tonight was for celebrating survival and the possibility of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. Outside, she could hear the voices of Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves working together to secure the area and tend the wounded. Former enemies were sharing water bottles and ammunition, joking together with the easy camaraderie of soldiers who'd fought side by side. It was, Aria realized, the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. Chapter 7. 3 hours after the battle, the Crimson Falls pack house buzzed with an energy Aria had never experienced before. Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves moved through the corridors together, not as wary allies maintaining careful distance, but as comrades who'd fought side by side and survived together. The transformation was remarkable and slightly surreal. Aria stood in the kitchen, helping distribute food and medical supplies to the combined forces, when Sarah Chun approached on crutches. The injured Crimson Falls wolf she'd rescued in the forest looked infinitely better, clean, bandaged, and sporting a genuine smile. I wanted to thank you, Sarah said, settling carefully into a nearby chair. Not just for helping me in the forest, but for making this alliance happen. I never thought I'd see Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves sharing meals and war stories. Through the doorway, Aria could see exactly what Sarah meant. In the main gathering room, wolves from both packs sat together around tables, recounting the battle with the animated gestures of warriors replaying their finest moments. Laughter echoed through the space, genuine, unguarded laughter that spoke of barriers being torn down. I'm not sure I can take credit for any of this, Aria replied, handing Sarah a cup of coffee. Desperation makes for strange partnerships. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But desperation doesn't make people risk everything for their enemies. That takes something else entirely. Before Aria could respond, familiar voices drew her attention to the main room. Helena and Kael sat at one of the central tables, deep in conversation with Marcus and David. The 4-pack leaders were bent over what appeared to be a territorial map, discussing something with the intense focus of strategists planning a campaign. Peace negotiations, Sarah said, following Aria's gaze. They've been at it for 2 hours, hammering out border agreements, resource-sharing protocols, joint security measures. It's like watching history in the making. It was exactly like that, Aria realized. The war between their packs hadn't been some ancient conflict. It had started within their lifetimes, escalated through tragedy and misunderstanding, and now might actually end through cooperation and mutual respect. Aria, Marcus called from the main room. We need your input on something. She made her way to the strategy table, acutely aware of the eyes following her movement. Everyone in the room understood her unique position, the bridge between two worlds, the enforcer who'd given up everything to make this alliance possible. What can I help with? She asked, settling into an empty chair between Helena and Kael. The proximity to her mate sent familiar electricity through her system, but she forced herself to focus on the discussion. Patrol schedules, Helena explained, pointing to the marked territories on the map. We need to coordinate our border security to prevent any more rogue incursions, but our patrol patterns have been designed around avoiding each other's territories for years. We're proposing joint patrols, Kael added, his arm brushing against hers as he leaned over the map. Mixed teams from both packs covering overlapping zones. Better coverage, and it forces our people to work together on a daily basis. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of maintaining separate, parallel security systems, they'd create an integrated network that would be stronger and more efficient than either pack could manage alone. It could work, Aria mused, studying the proposed patrol routes. But you'll need clear command structures. Who has authority when Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves are working together? Rotating leadership, David suggested. Shadow Moon takes point on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Crimson Falls on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Sunday is joint command. What about communication protocols? Marcus asked. Our radio systems aren't compatible. Actually, they are, Aria said, remembering technical specifications from her enforcer training. Same frequency range, same encryption standards. We've just never bothered to coordinate channels before. They worked through the details with the focused intensity of people who understood they were building something unprecedented. Border checkpoints, emergency response procedures, resource allocation, all the mundane administrative details that would transform their temporary alliance into a permanent partnership. There's one more thing we need to address, Helena said when the patrol schedules were finalized. Her pale eyes found areas across the table. The question of pack membership. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Helena was really asking. Where did Aria belong in this new world they were creating? She'd been exiled from Shadow Moon, welcomed into Crimson Falls territory under extraordinary circumstances, and now existed in a legal limbo that couldn't continue indefinitely. The exile was rescinded, Helena continued. Officially, you're welcome to return to Shadow Moon with full honors restored. But Aria could hear the hesitation in her aunt's voice. But circumstances have changed, Kael said quietly. The mate bond complicates things. He was right, and everyone at the table knew it. The mate bond was a sacred connection that transcended pack loyalties, but it also created practical problems. Which territory would they live in? Which alpha would they answer to? How could their relationship develop properly when they belonged to different packs? There is a precedent, David said slowly. The Riverside Pack merger of '89, when two smaller packs combined their territories and leadership structures. Are you suggesting? Helena's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. A formal merger, Kael confirmed. Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls becoming a single territory under joint leadership. The suggestion hit the room like a lightning bolt. A merger would solve the immediate problem of divided loyalties, but it would also mean the end of both packs as independent entities. It was perhaps the most radical solution any of them could have imagined. Marcus began, then stopped, apparently unable to find words for the magnitude of what they were discussing. Unprecedented, Helena finished. Two packs with our history, our territorial disputes, our completely different approaches to pack law and governance. It would take time, Kael acknowledged. Years, probably. Gradually integrating our systems, our traditions, our families. But the foundation is already there. We've proven we can work together, fight together, survive together. Aria felt the mate bond singing in her chest as she contemplated the possibility. A merged pack would mean no more divided loyalties, no more impossible choices between love and duty. It would mean building something entirely new from the ashes of old conflicts. What would it look like? She asked. Structurally, two alphas can't lead the same territory. Actually, they can, David said with growing excitement. The historical precedents are rare, but they exist. Co-alpha leadership, with specialized responsibilities. One handles internal affairs, the other manages external relations. Or one focuses on military matters while the other oversees civilian governance. It could work, Helena mused, especially given our complementary strengths. Crimson Falls has superior defensive capabilities and discipline. Shadow Moon has better intelligence networks and diplomatic relationships. The question is, Kael said, looking directly at Aria, do our people want it to work? Before anyone could answer, a commotion from the main room drew their attention. Raised voices, not angry but animated, echoed through the space. They moved to investigate and found an extraordinary sight. Tom, the massive Shadow Moon warrior who'd been so suspicious of Aria just hours earlier, was arm wrestling with a Crimson Falls wolf twice his size while wolves from both packs cheered them on. Beside them, Sarah was teaching a group of Shadow Moon wolves a card game that involved increasingly creative insults and penalty drinks. Look at them, Helena said softly. 3 hours ago, they were preparing to kill each other. Now they're acting like pack mates. Not acting, Kael corrected.
Being.
When wolves fight together, bleed together, survive together, bonds form whether we plan for them or not. Aria watched the interactions with growing amazement. These weren't the careful, polite exchanges of diplomatic allies. This was the genuine camaraderie of people who'd found common ground despite their differences. Children from both packs played together in the corners while their parents shared stories and strategies. "I think," she said slowly, "the real question isn't whether our people want this merger. It's whether we're brave enough to make it official." Helena and Kael exchanged a long look across the table, not as former enemies, but as leaders contemplating the most important decision of their careers. The weight of generations hung between them, decades of conflict and mistrust that could be swept away with the right words. "There would have to be conditions," Helena said finally. "Safeguards to protect both sides during the transition." "Agreed," Kael nodded. "Gradual integration with review periods and exit clauses if it's not working." "And the name?" David asked. "We can't exactly call it the Shadow Moon Crimson Falls Pack." "Moonfall," Aria suggested without thinking. "The Moonfall Pack." The name felt right the moment she said it, honoring both their histories while creating something entirely new. Around the table, she could see the others testing the sound of it, imagining how it would feel to belong to something that had never existed before. "Moonfall," Kael repeated slowly. "I like it. It has a good sound," Helena agreed. "Strong, but not aggressive. Historical, but forward-looking." "So we're really doing this?" Marcus asked, his weathered face creased with disbelief. "After everything that's happened between our packs, we're actually going to merge?" "Not immediately," Helena cautioned. "This is just the beginning of discussions. There will be logistics to work out, legal frameworks to establish, integration protocols to develop. It could take months or even years to fully implement." "But yes," Kael added, his storm gray eyes meeting Aria's across the table. "We're really going to try." The mate bond flared between them at his words, filled with hope and possibility. For the first time since discovering their connection, Aria could envision a future where their relationship didn't require impossible sacrifices from either of them. "There's something else we need to address," Helena said, her voice taking on a more formal tone. "The immediate question of where you'll be living while these merger discussions are taking place." Aria's heart clenched. In all the excitement of planning their joint future, she'd forgotten about the practical realities of the present. Where did she belong right now? Tonight, when the paperwork was still theoretical and the pack bonds were still separate. "She stays here," Kael said immediately. "If we're serious about this merger, if we're committed to making it work, then we need to start acting like it now." "Agreed," Helena nodded. "Besides, the mate bond isn't something you can ignore or put on hold. It needs to be nurtured, allowed to develop properly." The casual acceptance in her aunt's voice brought tears to Aria's eyes. After years of feeling broken, of believing she was destined to be alone, her family was not just accepting her mate bond but actively supporting it. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank us yet," Helena said with a wry smile. "Wait until you see how much paperwork is involved in merging two pack territories. You might change your mind about this whole arrangement." As laughter filled the room, Aria felt something settle in her chest, a deep sense of rightness she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't choosing between competing loyalties or making impossible sacrifices. She was part of building something new, something that honored her past while embracing her future. The mate bond pulsed with contentment as Kael's hand found hers under the table, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. Around them, the combined voices of their people rose in conversation and laughter, the sound of former enemies becoming family. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, difficult decisions to make, old wounds to heal. But it was a beginning. And for two people who'd found love in the midst of war, sometimes a beginning was the most beautiful thing in the world. Outside, dawn was breaking over the forest, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, Aria thought, for a new kind of pack. The Moonfall Pack, built on the foundation of love conquering hate, cooperation triumphing over conflict. She couldn't wait to see what they would build together. Chapter 8. By the time the sun fully rose over the Crimson Falls territory, most of the combined pack had settled into exhausted sleep. The main gathering room had been converted into a temporary dormitory, with Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls wolves claiming couches, chairs, and floor space with the easy camaraderie of soldiers who'd shared a foxhole. But Aria couldn't sleep. The mate bond hummed with restless energy in her chest, made stronger by proximity and the emotional intensity of the past 24 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she was hyper-aware of Kael's presence somewhere in the pack house, of the invisible thread that connected them growing tighter with each passing moment. She found herself on the back deck, wrapped in a borrowed jacket and watching the morning mist rise from the forest. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the sense of pine and earth that would forever remind her of this place, this moment when everything changed. Couldn't sleep either? Kael's voice came from behind her, low and rough with exhaustion. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, still wearing the clothes from the battle but looking somehow more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. The terrible tension that had marked his features during the crisis was gone, replaced by something softer and infinitely more dangerous to her peace of mind. "Too much adrenaline," she replied, though they both knew it was more than that. "Too much, everything." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The mate bond pulsed between them, no longer fighting against circumstances, but free to explore the connection they'd both been trying to ignore. "I keep thinking this is all a dream," Kael said quietly. "That I'm going to wake up and find our pack still at war, still trying to kill each other over territory and pride." "It's not a dream," Aria assured him, though part of her shared the same disbelief. "We really did it. We actually made peace. We did more than that." He turned to face her fully, his storm-gray eyes intense in the morning light. "We created something entirely new, something that shouldn't be possible." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. They weren't just talking about the merger anymore. They were talking about what existed between them, the bond that had defied every rational expectation and political reality. "Kael," Aria began, then stopped. What could she say that would encompass everything she was feeling? The gratitude for his trust, the amazement at what they'd accomplished, the desperate need that was building in her chest every moment they stood close together. "I know," he said softly, as if he could read her thoughts. "I feel it too." His hand came up to cup her cheek, and Aria's breath caught at the contact. It was such a simple touch, but after days of fighting their connection, of maintaining careful distance despite the mate bond's pull, it felt earth-shaking. "The night you found your mate," she whispered. "Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" "Never." His thumb traced across her cheekbone with gentle reverence. "I thought it would be simple. Meet her, claim her, live happily ever after with someone who fit perfectly into my world. And instead you got me." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. "The enemy. The enforcer, who might have killed your sister. The woman who's turned your entire life upside down." "Instead I got you," he agreed, but his tone held no regret. "The bravest person I've ever met. The woman who gave up everything she'd ever known to save people she'd been taught to hate. The mate who's made me question every assumption I had about loyalty and love and what it means to be a leader." Aria stared up at him, seeing her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "I never thought I'd have a mate at all," she admitted. "I was broken, incomplete. The moon goddess forgot about me." She didn't forget. Kael's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses from years of warrior training. "She was just waiting for the right moment. Waiting for us to be ready for something this complicated." "Are we ready?" The question slipped out before Aria could stop it. "For this, for each other, for everything that comes next?" Instead of answering with words, Kael leaned down and kissed her. It was nothing like the desperate, stolen moments they might have shared in the forest. This was deliberate, reverent, full of promise and possibility. His lips moved against hers with gentle pressure, and Aria felt the mate bond ignite like wildfire in her veins. Every nerve ending came alive at once. Her hands fisted in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. The scent of pine and leather surrounded her, mixed now with something uniquely Kael, warmth and strength and the kind of safety she'd never known she was craving. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Aria could see her own amazement reflected in Kael's eyes, the same sense that the world had just shifted on its axis. The claiming, she breathed, recognizing what was happening between them. The mate bond was moving to its next phase, demanding the physical and spiritual connection that would complete their union. "Are you ready?" he asked, echoing her earlier question. Aria thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The war between their packs, the impossible circumstances of their meeting, the sacrifices they'd both made to get here. Then she thought about the future they were building together, the merged pack that would honor both their histories while creating something entirely new. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready." Kael's eyes darkened with an emotion that went far beyond simple desire. "Then come with me." He led her back through the sleeping pack house, moving quietly past the forms of their people scattered throughout the main rooms. At the base of the stairs, he paused, giving her one last chance to change her mind. "Once we do this," he said quietly, "there's no going back. We'll be mated for life, bound together in ways that go beyond anything either of our packs has seen before." "I don't want to go back," Aria replied without hesitation. "I want to go forward. With you." His room was on the third floor, a private space that reflected the man rather than the alpha. Books lined one wall, mixed with weapons and tactical gear. The bed was large and comfortable, covered with quilts that looked handmade. Windows on two walls provided views of the forest that would be their shared territory. But Aria barely noticed the details. All her attention was focused on Kael as he closed the door behind them, the soft click of the latch sounding like a decision being made. "I need you to know something," he said, not moving from his position by the door. "About Emma, about what you said earlier." Aria's heart clenched. "Kael, we don't have to." "Yes, we do." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about it all night, about what happened during that border raid. And I realized something." "What?" "It doesn't matter." The words came out quiet but firm. "Whatever role you played in that fight, whatever shots you fired or didn't fire, it doesn't matter. Emma's dead, and nothing will bring her back. But you're here and you're alive, and you risked everything to save my pack. That's what matters now." Tears blurred Aria's vision. "How can you forgive me so easily?" "Because the mate bond doesn't lie," Kael said simply. "It chose you for me, chose me for you. That means something. It means we're meant to build something together, not tear each other apart with guilt over a past we can't change." He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms with gentle urgency. "I choose you, Aria Blackwood. Not to spite our history, but because of everything we've overcome to get here." "I choose you too," she whispered against his lips. "Kael Crimson, alpha of my heart, mate of my soul." The formal words triggered something primal in both of them. The mate bond, which had been simmering beneath the surface for days, finally burst into full flame. Kael's mouth found hers with hungry desperation, and Aria responded with equal fervor. They moved together toward the bed, hands roaming over clothes that suddenly seemed like unnecessary barriers. Kael's shirt hit the floor first, revealing the muscled torso she'd glimpsed in the forest. Aria traced the lines of old scars with reverent fingers, marking the places where he'd been wounded in service to his pack. "Your turn," he murmured, his hands finding the hem of her sweater. She helped him pull it over her head, then caught her breath at the way he looked at her. Not just with desire, though that was certainly there, but with wonder and possessiveness, and something that might have been worship. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Perfect." "I'm not perfect," Aria protested, acutely aware of her own scars from years of enforcer work. "You are to me." His hands skimmed over her skin, tracing the evidence of battles fought and survived. "Every mark, every scar, they're part of what made you strong enough to find me." They sank onto the bed together, the rest of their clothes disappearing with increasing urgency. When skin finally met skin, the mate bond exploded through both of them with an intensity that left them gasping. Kael's hands mapped every inch of her body as if he were memorizing her, while Aria lost herself in the sensation of being truly known for the first time in her life. This wasn't just physical attraction, it was recognition on the deepest possible level, two souls that had been separated finally coming home. "Please," she breathed, arching against him as the need became unbearable. "I know," he murmured, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. "I feel it too." When he finally claimed her, marking her as his mate with the ancient bite that would bond them forever, Aria cried out with more than physical pleasure. The mate bond completed itself in that moment, weaving their souls together in ways that went beyond anything she'd ever imagined possible. She was no longer just Aria Blackwood, Shadow Moon Enforcer. She was Aria, Kael's mate, co-founder of the Moonfall Pack, bridge between two worlds that had found unity in love. As they moved together in the ancient rhythm of mated pairs, Aria felt the last of her walls crumble. All the years of feeling incomplete, of wondering what was wrong with her that she couldn't find her place in the world, they were gone, swept away by the certainty that this was where she belonged. "Mine," Kael growled against her throat, his canines extending as the claiming mark took hold. "Yours," she agreed breathlessly. "Always yours." When the final moment came, it was with an intensity that left them both shaking. The mate bond sang with completion, no longer a connection fighting against circumstances, but a fundamental part of who they were. Aria could feel Kael's emotions as if they were her own, could sense his thoughts and needs and dreams for their future. They lay tangled together afterward, skin cooling in the morning air but hearts still racing with the magnitude of what they'd shared. Outside, the sounds of the pack house awakening filtered through the windows, voices calling greetings, the clatter of breakfast preparations, children's laughter echoing through the halls. "Listen to that," Kael said softly, his arms tightening around her. Aria listened, and what she heard made her smile. Shadow Moon and Crimson Fall's voices mixing together, no longer separate but unified. The sound of a new pack being born. "They're adapting faster than we expected," she observed. "Children and warriors," Kael agreed. "They're the most honest about what works and what doesn't. Our people can feel that this alliance is right, even if they can't explain why." Speaking of alliances, Aria said, propping herself up on one elbow to look down at him. "What happens now? With us, I mean. How do we lead a merged pack when we're mated to each other? Won't that create conflicts of interest?" Kael's hand came up to stroke her hair, his touch gentle and possessive. "It'll create balance," he said. "I've always been too focused on the military aspects of leadership. You understand the human element, the emotional needs of pack members. Together, we'll be stronger than either of us could be alone." "Co-alphas," Aria mused. "It has a nice ring to it." "Alpha and alpha," Kael agreed with a smile. Kael and Aria Moonfall. The name sent a thrill through her. Moonfall, not Crimson or Blackwood, but something entirely new that honored both their histories while pointing toward their shared future. "I like the sound of that," she said, leaning down to kiss him again. As their lips met, the mate bond flared with contentment and possibility. Outside, their new pack was awakening to a world where yesterday's enemies had become today's family. Inside this room, two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds were planning a future built on love conquering hate. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges ahead, difficult decisions to make, old wounds to heal on both sides. But they would face it together, as mates, as co-leaders, as the bridge between two worlds that had found unity in their love. And for the first time in either of their lives, that felt like more than enough. Chapter 9. Aria woke to the sensation of strong arms around her and the steady rhythm of Kael's heartbeat beneath her cheek. For a moment, she was disoriented. The unfamiliar room, the scent of pine and leather that now carried her own essence mixed within it, the profound sense of completeness that filled every cell of her body. Then memory flooded back, and with it came a smile that felt like it might split her face in two. The claiming, the mate bond, finally completed and humming with satisfied contentment in her chest. The feeling of being exactly where she belonged for the first time in her life. "Good morning, mate," Kael's voice rumbled against her ear, rough with sleep but warm with affection. "Good morning yourself," she replied, tilting her head to look up at him. Even disheveled and half awake, he was beautiful. All strong lines and storm-gray eyes that looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The claiming mark on her neck throbbed with gentle warmth, and she could see the matching bite on his shoulder where she'd marked him in return. The sight sent a possessive thrill through her that was entirely new and completely addictive. "How do you feel?" he asked, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Different," she said honestly.
Complete.
Like I was walking around with half my soul missing and didn't realize it until now. "I know exactly what you mean." His hand moved to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her lips. "I can feel you in here." He tapped his chest, "like you've always been part of me." The mate bond pulsed between them, no longer fighting against circumstances, but free to simply exist. Aria could sense Kael's emotions as if they were her own: contentment, fierce protectiveness, and underneath it all, a love so deep it took her breath away. A soft knock on the door interrupted the moment. "Alpha." Sarah's voice came through the wood, carefully respectful. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's something you need to see." Kael sighed but sat up, automatically reaching for the clothes scattered on the floor. "What is it?" "The merger proposal," Sarah replied. "Alpha Helena left some documentation before she departed this morning. She wants your review and signature before the Pack Council meeting this afternoon." "This afternoon?" Aria sat up as well, suddenly aware of how late in the day it must be. Sunlight streamed through the windows at an angle that suggested early afternoon rather than morning. "It's almost 1 o'clock, Kael confirmed with a sheepish grin. "We were more exhausted than I thought." As they dressed with the comfortable efficiency of people who'd already claimed each other completely, Aria marveled at how natural it felt. There was none of the awkwardness she might have expected after such an intense night. Instead, there was a sense of rightness, of puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. "Ready to face our pack?" Kael asked, offering her his hand. "Our pack." The word sent a thrill through her. Not his pack or her pack, but theirs. The Moonfall Pack, built on the foundation of love conquering hate. "Ready," she confirmed, lacing their fingers together. They found Sarah waiting in the hallway, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes bright with curiosity. The claiming marks were impossible to hide, and Aria could see the moment Sarah noticed them: surprise, followed quickly by understanding, and what looked like genuine happiness. "Congratulations," Sarah said simply. "Both of you. The pack will be thrilled." "Will they?" Aria asked, sudden uncertainty creeping in. It was one thing to accept her as an ally during a crisis, another thing entirely to welcome her as their alpha's mate and co-leader. "Are you kidding?" Sarah grinned. "Half of them have been taking bets on when you two would finally stop fighting the obvious. You should have seen the looks you were giving each other yesterday." Heat crept up Aria's neck, but before she could respond, familiar voices echoed from the main gathering room below. She recognized Helena's authoritative tone mixed with Marcus's steady baritone, and what sounded like most of the Shadow Moon Pack Council. "The delegation is larger than expected," Kael observed as they descended the stairs. What they found in the main room took Aria's breath away. Every member of both pack councils was present, along with what appeared to be most of the adult wolves from both territories. Children played in the corners while their parents engaged in animated discussions about everything from territory boundaries to school districts. But it was the atmosphere that amazed her most. Instead of the careful tension she might have expected from such a momentous gathering, there was genuine excitement. Wolves who'd been enemies a week ago were comparing notes on everything from hunting techniques to family recipes. "There they are," Helena announced as Aria and Kael entered the room. "Our newly mated co-alphas." A cheer went up from the assembled crowd that made Aria's eyes water with surprise and gratitude. These people, her people, she realized were genuinely happy for them. The claiming marks were visible evidence that their alliance wasn't just political but personal, that the bond between their alphas would help cement the merger for generations to come. "Thank you," Kael said, his alpha voice carrying easily through the room. "All of you, for your trust, your support, and your willingness to build something unprecedented together. Speaking of building, Helena approached with a thick folder of documents. We have quite a bit of paperwork to make this official. Territory registration, pack charter modifications, leadership structure agreements. Bureaucracy waits for no one, not even newly mated pairs. How long will the process take? Aria asked, accepting the folder with some trepidation. Officially? 6 to 8 months for all the legal requirements to be processed. Helena's smile was wry. Practically, we start operating as a merged pack immediately. The paperwork is just catching up to reality. Marcus appeared at Helena's elbow, his weathered face creased with a kind of smile Aria hadn't seen from him in years. There's something else, he said. Something we wanted to discuss with both of you. What kind of something? Kael asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected. Leadership transition, Helena replied. I'm 55 years old, and I've been alpha for 15 years. This merger gives me the perfect opportunity to step back and let the next generation take over. Aria's heart stopped. You're retiring? Not immediately, Helena clarified. I'll stay on as senior advisor for the first year, help with the transition and any integration challenges. But yes, eventually I plan to step down and let you two lead without an old wolf looking over your shoulders. The implications were staggering. Aria had expected to eventually take over as Shadow Moon Alpha when Helena retired, but that had always seemed like something far in the future. Now she was facing the possibility of co-leading a merged pack within months of discovering her mate. That's a lot of responsibility, Kael said carefully. It's the right kind of responsibility, Marcus countered. You two have already proven you can work together under pressure, make hard decisions for the good of both packs, inspire loyalty from people who were trying to kill each other a week ago. If that's not alpha material, I don't know what is. Besides, Helena added with a grin that reminded Aria of their shared family traits, you'll have excellent advisors. Marcus and David have agreed to serve as joint betas, and Sarah's accepted the position of pack enforcer. What about me? Aria asked, confused about her own role in this new structure. You, Kael said, his hand finding hers with automatic ease, are co-alpha. Equal authority, shared responsibility, joint decision-making on all major pack business. But traditionally, packs don't merge, Helena interrupted gently. Traditionally, sworn enemies don't become mates and unite their territories. We're writing new traditions now. David approached from across the room, his expression more relaxed than Aria had ever seen it. There's been a development, he announced. 3 neighboring packs have sent diplomatic envoys requesting meetings about mutual defense packs. Already, Kael's eyebrows rose in surprise. Word travels fast, David explained. A successful merger between 2 hostile territories, combined with the coordinated victory over a major rogue threat? Other alphas are taking notice. They want to know if this new Moonfall pack is interested in broader alliances. Aria felt a thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. They were less than 24 hours into their merger, and already other packs were viewing them as a significant political force. One crisis at a time, she said, though she couldn't keep the smile out of her voice. Let's get our own house in order before we start reshaping regional politics. Wise words from our future alpha, Marcus said with approval that warmed Aria's heart. The next several hours passed in a blur of signatures, discussions, and planning sessions. Pack members rotated through various committees: education integration, security coordination, resource management, cultural preservation. Everyone seemed to have opinions about everything, but there was an underlying current of excitement that made even the most mundane administrative details feel momentous. As the afternoon wore on, Aria found herself standing with Kael on the back deck again, watching the forest that would now be their shared territory. The familiar sense of pine and earth seemed different somehow, not just Crimson Falls territory or Shadow Moon territory, but home. Having second thoughts? Kael asked, noting her contemplative mood. Just the opposite, Aria replied, leaning into his side with natural ease. I'm thinking about how quickly everything has changed. A week ago, I was just an enforcer who couldn't find her mate. Today I'm co-alpha of a merged pack, Mated to the man I once considered my greatest enemy. Do you miss it? He asked quietly. The simplicity of before? When you knew exactly who the enemies were and what your role was supposed to be. Aria considered the question seriously. There had been a certain comfort in the clear boundaries of their old conflict, Shadow Moon versus Crimson Falls, us versus them, right versus wrong. Now they were navigating uncharted territory, where former enemies had become family and traditional roles were being redefined daily. No, she said finally. I don't miss it. The simplicity was also loneliness. It was feeling incomplete and not understanding why. It was believing I was broken because I couldn't find my place in a world that was too small for what I was meant to become. And what were you meant to become? She turned in his arms, looking up into storm-gray eyes that held her entire future. Yours, she said simply. Your mate, your partner, your equal. Co-alpha of something bigger and better than either of our packs could have been alone. The mate bond flared between them, warm with contentment and bright with possibility. Around them, the sounds of their combined pack continued. Children playing, adults planning, families forming connections that would last for generations. There's something I want to show you, Kael said, taking her hand and leading her down the deck steps toward the forest. They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, following a path that wound deeper into the woods. The afternoon light filtered through the canopy above, creating patterns of gold and green that shifted with every breeze. Here, Kael said finally, stopping in a small clearing that overlooked a valley stretching toward the distant mountains. It was breathtaking, a panoramic view that encompassed both their former territories and the land beyond. Aria could see the boundaries that had once seemed so important, the imaginary lines that had divided families and friends for years. This is where I come when I need to think, Kael explained. When the weight of leadership gets too heavy or the decisions get too complicated. I come here and remember that there's something bigger than pack politics and territorial disputes. It's beautiful, Aria breathed, understanding immediately why this place would provide perspective. I wanted to share it with you, he continued, because this is our territory now. All of it stretching as far as we can see. And more than that, it's our responsibility. Every wolf down there, every family, every child who's going to grow up not knowing that Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls were ever enemies. The magnitude of what they were building hit Aria with fresh force. They weren't just creating a merged pack, they were writing the foundation for an entirely new way of thinking about pack relationships, conflict resolution, and what it meant to be a family. Are you scared? She asked honestly. Terrified, Kael admitted with a rueful smile. But not of failing. I'm scared of succeeding beyond our wildest dreams and then not being worthy of what we've created. We'll be worthy, Aria said with quiet certainty. Because we'll make mistakes and learn from them. Because we'll put our people first and our ego second. Because we have each other to keep us honest and grounded. As if summoned by her words, the mate bond pulsed with shared resolve. They would face whatever challenges came together, as partners in every sense of the word. I love you, Kael said, the words carrying the weight of a vow. I love you too, Aria replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they kissed in the clearing that overlooked their shared domain, Aria felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was no longer the lonely enforcer who couldn't find her place in the world. She was Aria Moonfall, co-alpha and mate, bridge between worlds and architect of a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. The sun was setting over their territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed to bless their union. In the distance, smoke rose from the chimneys of both packhouses, soon to be combined into a single community center that would serve their merged family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make and problems to solve. But tonight, they had each other and the certainty that love had indeed conquered hate. It was, Aria thought as they walked hand in hand back toward home, the most beautiful ending she could have imagined. And the most promising beginning they could have asked for. Chapter 10. 3 weeks after the merger began, Aria stood in the main assembly hall of what had once been the Crimson Falls Pack House and marveled at the transformation. The space had been expanded to accommodate their larger population, with new seating areas that mixed Shadowmoon's comfortable couches with Crimson Fall's sturdy wooden chairs. Family photos from both packs lined the walls, creating a visual history that honored their separate pasts while celebrating their united future. Tonight was the night they would make it official, the formal declaration ceremony that would legally establish the Moonfall Pack and officially install her and Kael as co-alphas. Representatives from 6 neighboring packs had arrived to witness the historic event, along with the Regional Pack Council's legal authority who would oversee the formal documents. Nervous? Kael asked, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee. He looked magnificent in the formal ceremonial clothes they'd chosen, traditional pack leadership attire that combined elements from both their histories. Terrified, Aria admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. She was wearing her mother's ceremonial dress, altered to fit and updated with Crimson Fall's silver threading that represented their union. What if this doesn't work? What if we've bitten off more than we can chew? Then we'll figure it out together, Kael replied simply, just like we have with everything else. Over the past 3 weeks, they'd faced a dozen challenges that could have derailed the merger. Disputes over territory boundaries, disagreements about pack law integration, personality conflicts between former enemies who were still learning to trust each other. But each challenge had been met and overcome through patience, compromise, and the kind of unified leadership that inspired confidence in their people. The visiting alphas seem impressed, Aria observed, watching through the doorway as their guests mingled with Moonfall Pack members in the main gathering area. They should be, Helena said, joining them with Marcus at her side. In 3 weeks, you've accomplished what most experts said would take years. Pack integration, unified command structure, coordinated defense systems. It's remarkable. We had good teachers, Kael said, nodding toward both Helena and Marcus. And motivated students. It was true. The speed of integration had surprised everyone, including Aria and Kael themselves. But their people had embraced the change with enthusiasm that suggested they'd all been hungry for something larger than the endless cycle of territorial disputes. 5 minutes until we begin, David announced, appearing in the doorway with Sarah beside him. As the new beta team, they'd been instrumental in coordinating the evening's events. The regional authority is ready to proceed, and all witnesses are in position. Aria's stomach clenched with nerves, but Kael's hand found hers with automatic ease. The mate bond hummed with mutual support, reminding her that whatever came next, they would face it together. Ready, co-alpha? He asked with a smile that made her heart skip. Ready, co-alpha, she confirmed. The assembly hall fell silent as they entered, every seat filled with pack members, visiting dignitaries, and the handful of neutral witnesses required for the formal ceremony. Children sat cross-legged on the floor in front, their faces bright with excitement at being part of something historic. Elder Matthews, the regional authority, stood at the front of the room with the official documents spread across a ceremonial table. At 73, he was one of the most respected legal minds in the werewolf community, and his presence lent weight to the proceedings that would echo throughout the region. We gather tonight, Elder Matthews began, his voice carrying easily through the hall, to witness the formal establishment of the Moonfall Pack, created through the voluntary merger of the Shadow Moon and Crimson Falls territories. A murmur of excitement rippled through the assembled crowd. This was the moment they'd all been working toward, the official recognition that would make their union legally binding and politically significant. Before we proceed, Elder Matthews continued, I must ask the traditional questions. Are there any among you who object to this merger? Any who believe it violates pack law or threatens the welfare of either territory? Silence filled the hall. Aria held her breath, half expecting someone to speak up, to voice the concerns that must surely exist despite the apparent enthusiasm for their union. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the soft sounds of children shifting in their seats and the distant hum of the air circulation system. Very well, Elder Matthews nodded approvingly. Kael Crimson and Aria Blackwood, please step forward. They moved to stand before the ceremonial table, their hands still linked, the claiming marks on their necks visible proof of their personal bond. Elder Matthews studied them for a moment with the assessing gaze of someone who'd overseen dozens of pack transitions. Do you, Kael Crimson, voluntarily relinquish your position as sole alpha of the Crimson Falls pack in order to become co-alpha of the merged Moonfall territory? I do, Kael replied firmly. Do you, Aria Blackwood, accept the responsibilities of co-alpha leadership and commit to serving the welfare of all Moonfall pack members, regardless of their original territorial affiliation? I do, Aria said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. And do you both swear to lead with wisdom, courage, and unity, putting the needs of your people above personal interests or territorial loyalties? We do, they said in unison, the words carrying the weight of a sacred vow. Elder Matthews lifted the first document from the table, a parchment covered in official seals and dense legal text. Then, by the authority vested in me by the Regional Pack Council, I hereby recognize the establishment of the Moonfall Pack, with Kael Crimson and Aria Blackwood as co-alphas, effective immediately. Cheers erupted throughout the hall, but Elder Matthews wasn't finished. He lifted a second document, this one even more ornate than the first. Furthermore, he continued as the noise died down, in recognition of the unprecedented nature of this merger and its successful resolution of a decade-long territorial dispute. The Regional Council hereby designates the Moonfall Pack as a diplomatic territory, with authority to mediate conflicts between neighboring packs and negotiate mutual defense agreements on behalf of the regional community. Stunned silence greeted this announcement. Diplomatic territory status was almost unheard of. Only 3 packs in the entire continent held such designation, and it came with both tremendous prestige and significant responsibility. What exactly does that mean? Aria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elder Matthews smiled. It means your successful merger has convinced the Regional Council that Moonfall represents a new model for pack relationships. You'll have the authority to mediate disputes, negotiate treaties, and serve as neutral ground for interpack meetings. Essentially, you become the diplomatic center for this entire region. The implications were staggering. Instead of just managing their own territory, they would be helping to shape relationships between dozens of packs across hundreds of square miles. That's a lot of responsibility, Kael said carefully. It's the right kind of responsibility, Elder Matthews replied, echoing Marcus's words from weeks earlier. Your union has already prevented one war and eliminated a major rogue threat. The council believes you can do the same for other conflicts. Helena stood from her seat in the front row, her face bright with pride. If I may, she said formally, I would like to present the new co-alphas with their first diplomatic challenge. Aria's heart sank.
What now?
The Riverside and Pine Creek packs have been feuding over water rights for 6 months, Helena continued. Both alphas have agreed to accept Moonfall mediation if you're willing to take the case. When? Kael asked. Next week, Helena replied with a grin. Welcome to diplomatic leadership. As laughter filled the hall, Aria felt the weight of their new roles settling on her shoulders. They weren't just pack leaders anymore. They were peacekeepers, diplomats, the bridge between communities that might otherwise destroy each other. We accept, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. All of it, the diplomatic status, the mediation case, the responsibility to help other packs find what we found. Elder Matthews nodded approvingly. Then it's official. The Moonfall Pack is hereby established, with co-alphas Kael and Aria Moonfall authorized too. Moonfall? Aria interrupted. Did you say Moonfall? Your legal surnames, Elder Matthews explained. As co-alphas of the Moonfall Pack, you both take the pack name as your family name. It's traditional. Moonfall. Aria interrupted. Did you say Moonfall? Your legal surnames, Elder Matthews explained. As co-alphas of the Moonfall Pack, you both take the pack name as your family name. It's traditional. Aria Moonfall. The name felt right in a way that surprised her, not just as an acknowledgement of their merged territories, but as a symbol of everything they'd built together. She was no longer Aria Blackwood, Shadow Moon Enforcer, or even Aria Crimson, mate of an enemy alpha. She was Aria Moonfall, co-alpha of something entirely new. The formal ceremony concluded with the signing of documents, the exchange of ceremonial items between pack leadership, and the presentation of a territorial charter that would govern their new status as a diplomatic territory. But it was the moment afterward, when their people surrounded them with congratulations and celebrations, that felt most significant to Aria. Speech. Someone called from the crowd, and the call was quickly taken up by dozens of voices. Speech from the co-alphas. Aria looked at Kael, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they moved to the front of the room where everyone could see them. 3 weeks ago, Aria began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, we were enemies. 2 packs locked in a cycle of violence and mistrust that had cost us all dearly. Tonight, Kael continued, picking up her thread seamlessly, we stand together as family. Not because we've forgotten our differences, but because we've chosen to build something stronger than our conflicts. The Moonfall Pack isn't just about merger, Aria said, looking out at the faces of their people. Former Shadow Moon wolves sitting next to former Crimson Falls warriors, children playing together regardless of which territory their parents came from. It's about the radical idea that enemies can become allies, that hate can be transformed into love, that the future doesn't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. We're honored to serve as your co-alphas, Kael added. But more than that, we're honored to be part of this family you've created. Because make no mistake, this merger succeeded because all of you chose to make it work. Applause filled the hall, but Aria raised her hand for quiet. There was something else she needed to say, something that had been building in her chest throughout the evening. There's a reason they call us Moonfall, she said, her voice soft but carrying clearly. The moon represents cycles, waxing and waning, darkness and light, the constant change that governs all our lives. But when the moon falls, when it comes down to Earth, it brings that celestial light into our daily reality. She looked at Kael, seeing her own wonder reflected in his storm-gray eyes. That's what we've done here. We've brought something celestial down to Earth, the idea that love really can conquer hate, that forgiveness really can heal old wounds, that enemies really can become family. And if we can do it, Kael said, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing, then any pack can do it. Any community, any family, any group of people who are tired of fighting and ready to build something better. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of possibility. Then someone started clapping, and the applause built until the entire hall was thundering with approval. As the formal celebration gave way to informal socializing, Aria found herself pulled into dozens of conversations with visiting alphas who wanted to know more about their integration methods, their conflict resolution strategies, their plans for the diplomatic territory responsibilities. How did you do it? Asked Alpha Morrison from the Pine Creek Pack. How did you get your people to accept former enemies as family? We didn't, Aria replied honestly. They did it themselves. We just created the conditions where it was possible. What kind of conditions? Shared goals, Kael answered, joining the conversation. Common enemies. Opportunities to work together towards something bigger than territorial pride. And you really think this model could work elsewhere? Alpha Morrison pressed. Pine Creek and Riverside have been feuding for generations. Every pack conflict is different, Aria acknowledged. But the underlying dynamics are usually the same: pride, fear, miscommunication, cycles of retaliation that have taken on lives of their own. If you can address those root causes, instead of just managing the symptoms, you might be surprised what becomes possible, Kael finished. As the evening wound down and the visiting dignitaries prepared to depart, Aria felt a deep sense of satisfaction settling in her bones. They'd done it, not just merged their packs, but created something that could serve as a model for peace throughout the region. Proud of you, Helena said, appearing at her elbow as the last of the guests said their goodbyes. Proud of us all, Aria corrected. None of this would have worked without everyone buying into the vision. The vision you and Kael created, Helena pointed out. Don't minimize your role in this. Leadership matters, especially the kind of leadership that inspires people to be better than they thought they could be. As Helena moved away to help coordinate the cleanup, Aria found herself alone with Kael in the slowly emptying hall. The ceremonial documents lay on the table between them, official proof that their impossible dream had become legal reality. Co-alpha Moonfall, Kael said, testing the sound of her new title. Co-alpha Moonfall, she replied, grinning at how natural it sounded. I could get used to that. Good, he said, pulling her into his arms with easy familiarity. Because we're going to be using those titles for a very long time. The mate bond hummed with contentment as they held each other in the empty hall, surrounded by the evidence of what they'd accomplished. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the water rights mediation, the ongoing integration projects, the responsibilities of serving as diplomatic territory. But tonight, they had each other and the certain knowledge that love had indeed conquered hate. Ready for whatever comes next?
Kael asked.
Aria looked around the hall one more time, taking in the mixed photographs on the walls, the empty chairs where former enemies had sat as family, the ceremonial table where their future had been legally recognized. Ready, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As mates, as co-alphas, as the bridge between worlds that had found unity in their love. The Moonfall Pack was officially born, and its future stretched ahead bright with possibility. Chapter 11. 3 weeks after the merger began, Aria stood in the main assembly hall of what had once been the Crimson Falls Pack House and marveled at the transformation. The space had been expanded to accommodate their larger population, with new seating areas that mixed Shadowmoon's comfortable couches with Crimson Fall's sturdy wooden chairs. Family photos from both packs lined the walls, creating a visual history that honored their separate pasts while celebrating their united future. Tonight was the night they would make it official, the formal declaration ceremony that would legally establish the Moonfall Pack and officially install her and Kael as co-alphas. Representatives from 6 neighboring packs had arrived to witness the historic event, along with the Regional Pack Council's legal authority who would oversee the formal documents. Chapter 12. The autumn air was crisp with promise as Aria stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Moonfall Community Center, watching the activity in the valley below. The building had been completed 6 months ago, a stunning architectural blend that incorporated design elements from both their original territories while creating something entirely fresh and modern. From her vantage point, she could see the bustling marketplace where former Shadowmoon and Crimson Falls families sold goods side by side, their children playing together in the adjoining park without any awareness that their parents had once been sworn enemies. The sight never failed to fill her with a profound sense of accomplishment. The Pine Creek delegation just arrived, Kael said, appearing beside her with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Even after a year of mated life, the simple gesture of him anticipating her needs sent warmth through her chest. How do they look? Aria asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Today marked their 15th successful mediation, and the Pine Creek Riverside water rights case had been one of their most challenging. Cautiously optimistic, Kael replied with a smile. Alpha Morrison actually shook hands with Alpha Riverside when they got out of their vehicles. First time they've been in the same space without weapons drawn in 2 years. Progress, Aria murmured, then laughed at her own understatement. Listen to us. A year ago, we were planning raids against each other's territories, and now we're mediating other packs' conflicts like seasoned diplomats. Speaking of seasoned diplomats, Kael said, his tone shifting to something more serious, I got a call from the Regional Council this morning. Aria's stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. Calls from the Regional Council usually meant new responsibilities, larger challenges, or both. What kind of call? The kind where they use words like unprecedented success and national recognition, Kael said, his storm gray eyes bright with excitement. Aria, they want to nominate the Moonfall model for the Continental Pack Council's Peace Initiative Award. The coffee cup nearly slipped from Aria's suddenly nerveless fingers. The Continental Pack Council represented hundreds of territories across North America. Their Peace Initiative Award was the highest honor a pack could receive for conflict resolution and diplomatic innovation. She began, then stopped, unable to find words for the magnitude of what he was telling her. Insane, Kael suggested with a grin. Overwhelming? Completely surreal? All of the above, Aria managed. What does it mean? Practically, I mean. If we win, it means the Moonfall model gets documented and distributed to every pack territory on the continent. It means our integration methods, our conflict resolution protocols, our diplomatic frameworks become the template for other communities trying to resolve territorial disputes. The implications were staggering. Their personal love story, their impossible alliance, their leap of faith that enemies could become family, all of it could influence pack relationships across an entire continent. No pressure, Aria said weakly. None at all, Kael agreed with obvious amusement. Just the possibility of reshaping werewolf politics for the next generation. Before Aria could respond, familiar voices drew their attention to the valley below. A group of children was running across the market square, their laughter echoing off the buildings. In the lead was a little girl with auburn hair and storm-gray eyes, Emma Moonfall, the daughter Kael had never expected to have, named for the sister whose death had once stood between them. "Mama, Papa," Emma called, spotting them on the observation deck and waving with the exuberant energy of a 4-year-old who'd inherited her father's alpha presence and her mother's strategic mind. Aria's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, where their second child was barely beginning to make its presence known. They'd only confirmed the pregnancy a week ago, and the news still felt surreal. Emma had been a surprise blessing 6 months after their mating. This new baby was planned, wanted, and already loved beyond measure. "Should we tell her?" Kael asked quietly, following her gaze to their daughter. "Not yet," Aria decided. "Let her have a little more time, as an only child. Besides, we haven't told anyone else yet. Not even Helena?" "Especially not Helena," Aria laughed. "She's already knitted enough baby blankets to outfit triplets from when Emma was born. If she knows there's another grandbaby coming, she'll take over the entire nursery wing." They made their way down to the main level, where the Pine Creek and Riverside delegations were being shown to the mediation chamber, a circular room designed specifically for conflict resolution, with comfortable seating arranged to promote equality and openness rather than adversarial positioning. Co-alphas Moonfall, Alpha Morrison greeted them formally, though his handshake was warm with genuine friendship. Over the past year, he'd become one of their strongest supporters in the regional pack community. "Thank you for agreeing to oversee this final session." "Our pleasure," Kael replied. "How are both parties feeling about the proposed agreement?" "Cautiously optimistic," Alpha Riverside said, echoing Kael's earlier assessment. "The water-sharing schedule you developed addresses both packs' needs without compromising anyone's sovereignty." As they settled into the mediation session, Aria marveled at how natural this had become. The careful balance of listening and guiding, the subtle interventions that helped parties find common ground, the patience required to let former enemies discover their own path to reconciliation. It all felt as instinctive now as enforcer work once had. "The key insight," she found herself saying as the session progressed, "is that you're not fighting over water rights. You're fighting over respect, recognition, and the fear that cooperation means weakness." Alpha Morrison and Alpha Riverside exchanged surprised looks. "How did you?" Morrison began. "Because we had the same fight," Kael said simply. "Different resources, same underlying dynamics. The water is just the symbol for deeper concerns about autonomy and pride." 2 hours later, they watched the Pine Creek and Riverside delegations sign a comprehensive water-sharing agreement that included provisions for joint resource management, shared infrastructure costs, and annual renewal celebrations that would keep the two packs connected rather than isolated. "That's number 15, Sarah observed as the delegations departed with handshakes and genuine smiles. As Moonfall's chief administrator, she'd been tracking their mediation success rate with the precision of someone who understood its historical significance. 15 successful mediations in 12 months, David added, appearing with a folder full of new requests. "And we have 7 more cases pending, including one from the Canadian territories." International requests. Aria shook her head in amazement. "A year ago, I was worried about surviving a single night in enemy territory. Now we're mediating conflicts between packs I couldn't have found on a map." "Success has a way of building momentum," Helena observed, joining their small group. At 56, She was thriving in her role as senior advisor, involved enough to share her wisdom but removed enough to let the next generation make their own mistakes and discoveries. Speaking of success, Helena continued with a knowing smile. How long were you planning to keep the pregnancy secret? Aria's jaw dropped. How did you? We just found out ourselves. Aunt's intuition, Helena said smugly. Plus the fact that you've been unconsciously protecting your stomach during combat training, you've switched from coffee to tea, and Kael's been hovering even more than usual. I don't hover, Kael protested. You absolutely hover, Sarah, David, and Helena said in unison, then dissolved into laughter at his offended expression. Fine, I hover, Kael admitted with a grin. But only because my mate is carrying our future and leading a diplomatic territory and raising our daughter and somehow making it all look effortless. The mate bond flared with warmth at his words, still as strong as ever despite a year of daily life together. If anything, it had grown deeper and more complex, interweaving their individual strengths into a partnership that was truly greater than the sum of its parts. Speaking of Emma, Aria said, scanning the community center. Where did our little escape artist disappear to? Playground, Marcus said, appearing with a 4-year-old in question perched on his shoulders. Someone was teaching the other children advanced tactical maneuvers, using the jungle gym as a fortress. That's my girl, Kael said proudly, then caught Aria's look and amended, I mean, that's something we should probably discourage. Too late, Marcus chuckled, setting Emma down so she could run to her parents. She's already organized them into squads with designated patrol routes and communication signals. Give her another year, and she'll have her own little army. Emma launched herself at Aria with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted her place in the world. Mama, I taught Tommy and Sarah and Michael how to do proper reconnaissance. Uncle Marcus said I did good. Did well? Aria corrected automatically, then kissed the top of her daughter's head. And yes, you did very well. But remember what we talked about. Leadership is about service, not power, Emma recited dutifully. And the best way to win a fight is to make sure it never happens. Exactly right. Kael scooped his daughter up, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. Now, how about we head home for dinner? I think Grandma Helena made her famous stew. With the little dumplings? Emma asked hopefully. With the little dumplings, Helena confirmed. And maybe some of those cookies you like if someone promises to eat her vegetables. As they walked home together, the sprawling house they'd built on the ridge overlooking both territories, Aria felt the deep contentment that had become her constant companion. This was what she'd been missing all those years, what had made her feel incomplete and broken. Not just the mate bond, though that was certainly part of it, but the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. Penny for your thoughts, Kael said, shifting Emma to his other arm so he could take Aria's hand. Just thinking about how much has changed, she replied. A year ago, I was convinced I was broken because I couldn't find my place in the world. Turns out the world just wasn't big enough yet for what I was meant to become. And what were you meant to become? Aria looked around at their extended family, Helena and Marcus walking ahead with easy companionship, Sarah and David bringing up the rear while debating the merits of different diplomatic protocols, Emma chattering away about her playground adventures while unconsciously demonstrating the leadership skills that would serve her well in whatever future she chose. This, she said simply. All of this. Your mate, Emma's mother, co-alpha of a pack that shouldn't exist, mediator of conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve. Bridge between worlds that needed connecting. The mate bond hummed with shared contentment as they reached their front door, where warm light spilled through the windows and the sense of home cooking promised the comfort of family dinner. Inside, Aria could hear the sounds that had become the soundtrack of their life. Pack members calling greetings, children playing in the adjoining rooms, the quiet conversations of people who'd chosen to become family. Ready for whatever comes next? Kael asked, echoing the question he'd posed so many times over the past year. Aria thought about the Continental Pack Council nomination, the growing list of mediation requests, the new baby growing inside her, and the hundreds of small daily challenges that came with building something unprecedented. Then she thought about the mate bond that connected her to her perfect partner, the daughter who carried their hopes for the future, and the extended family they'd created from former enemies. "Ready," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As mates, as co-alphas, as the bridge between worlds that had found unity in their love. The Moonfall Pack was more than either of them could have imagined when they'd started this impossible journey, and its future stretched ahead bright with infinite possibility. Love had indeed conquered hate, and in the process, it had created something beautiful enough to change the world. As they stepped through their front door into the warmth and chaos of home, Aria sent up a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever cosmic forces had brought them together. She'd found her mate, her purpose, and her place in a world that was finally big enough for everything she was meant to become. The Moonfall Pack was just the beginning.